and live now.
Well, welcome everybody, and welcome to the Community and Recreation Committee meeting, obviously by Zoom, and thank you for those who've joined in online. I'll just start with a prayer. Thank you. Almighty God, we give thanks and we give blessings which have been bestowed on New Zealand, laying aside all personal interests. We pray for guidance in our deliberations today, that we may conduct the affairs of this committee meeting with wisdom and humility, for the public welfare and the peace of our Nelson community, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Thank you, everyone. I know some of you might be, the novelty may not have worn off of Zoom meetings, others that may well have, so bear with us, but it's great that we can be all here today to carry on with the democracy of this council. We've got just a bit of housekeeping there, as you know. If you've, please don't use a chat for stuff which is meeting related, unless it's something you just need to confer with staff, etc. But please, as like in any meeting, being it's a public meeting, all transactions and discussions should be online for all to see. As before, for voting, etc., and I'll clarify that at the time you've got your tick or your crosses when we come up for voting. And please, if you're wanting to speak, just put the hand up icon, and you don't have to worry too much about taking the hand up icon down. Someone will take care of that for you. I welcome the youth councillors. We've got Isla Kennard and Janvi Harrison. I can see there, well done. And and please mute when you're not speaking. Just please put mute so we don't get any feedback of. And also, if we do go out into adjournments or breakout rooms, just remember to turn your microphone on mute for that as well. Confirmation of order of business is pretty much what we've got in the agenda there. There's not too many items there, but some of them are fairly meaty. We do have to still try and keep a very timely meeting, and I'd like to see a lot of efficiency, so please keep discussion and questions on point. And thank you for those questions that have been through, and thank you to the staff for the fulsome answers we've been given for those. Interests, if anyone's got any interest, as usual, please notify that. And then we've got we've got apologies. I see we've got apologies for Councillor Fulton, Councillor Sanson, and Councillor Rainey, and I've got a late apology for the Mayor, Rachel Rees. So just can I have someone move to accept those apologies?
I'll move.
Thank you. You've got Brian and Judine. I'll move it. Those in favour, just say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Those against? Carried. Thank you. And then the future ones, I'll do the plus and minuses, but we know these ones are fairly straightforward. I think that we've got the first coming up is public forum, and we've got Gail Noonan and John Hamilton updating us on the Nelson Rotary Club. So I'll hand that over to the governance, moving them into the role there. Thank you. So I'll just waiting on John. We're just waiting on John Hamilton.
Morning, John.
Good morning.
John, can you hear? You can hear me? You can hear me fine?
Yes, thank you. I'll just get the sound turned down slightly.
That's fine. I can hear you well, John. So I was just saying we've got obviously the public forum presentation for yourself, John, and Gail, regards to Nelson Rotary Club. As you may or may not know, you get 10 minutes for that, and within that time, if any questions that we may need for clarification, I'll get councillors to ask. But I'll let you get started there, Gail and John.
Thank you. Okay, I'm just waiting for the slide. Yep. To come up, and I'll just begin. Morena koutou, ko Gail Noonan tōku ingoa. I'm the past president of the Rotary Club of Nelson, and I have John Hambleton, our project manager for the purchase and installation of the Whare Haumaru. This project was a partnership project with the Nelson West, Rutherford and Whakatū Rotary Clubs and other funders who John will talk about. This morning we'll be talking about the reason for the facility, the work Rotary Clubs did hands-on. We'll talk about the challenges, our supporters and sponsors, and show you the delivery of the building and what's coming next. So we can go on to the second slide, please. When I became president of the Rotary Club last year, I saw a gap in the ability to support the homeless, and the mailroom were looking after these people, and I spoke to Philip Chapman about that. And the purpose of the facility is in the quote in the slide is Philip's quote. John and I then met with the mailroom board to see if they'd actually like us to look at the possibility of getting a building and to help as a place during the day with bathroom, laundry, kitchen, dining and computer facilities. The next slide, I'll be going fairly quickly. Rotarians love to be hands-on, and this project had some of that, starting with the removal of the old buildings on the site. And so you can go through slides 4 and 5. And then the 6th slide, I'm going to hand over to John, and he's going to talk through some challenges, and I'll come back at the end. So over to you, John. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gail. So I guess the first thing is the shots show we're a bit like a rugby team. We come in all shapes and sizes. But what Rotary really brought to this was a mix of skills and community reach. So I think that was probably a vital part of the project. The challenges, the planning challenge, it was a very difficult site. It's only 12.2 metres wide, and the slope of the ground and essentially the flooding type challenges that the site has meant we had to go through resource consent and look for some exemptions. We also had to site the building towards the front near the other building that's there because of the higher ground. Otherwise, we would have been trying to run services uphill. The end result was we had to put the building across the section, and that again posed some challenges around boundaries and being distanced from boundaries as we required. Next slide, please. So this will just give you an idea of where the site, what it looked like. Fortunately, the rain had stopped at that point. Unfortunately, timing came together with a full moon, high tide, and an absolute major weather event. So you'll just see that hose that's sitting there into the pile hole. That's actually a pump, and all the holes were to that depth of water, and most of that was coming up through the ground as well as having come from the air. So it wasn't a great start. In terms of that, we did have special design in terms of piles, and basically, we'll move to the next slide if we may. We had to engage the services of a sucker truck. So they went round, they took all the excess water off the site that they could suck out into that cane when dumped. But from there on, we still had to use submersible pumps down the pile holes to keep the water at bay while we poured concrete in. So that was quite a challenge. Can we move to the next slide, please? So because we were going across the section, we required to put fire-rated walls on both ends of the building. And we also had to fit in an accessible ramp. So you'll see a shot there of where the ramp joins the building. We also had to design the building 15% larger because the initial building was not large enough or the initial proposed size hadn't been large enough to cater for all needs, and including the need for accessibility and future-proofing. So the building itself, we had to also keep within transportable sizes. And the importance of that, just to demonstrate that, we were offered a free classroom, but by the time we transported that from Marlborough to Nelson, it would have been in excess of 35,000, and that was heavily discounted. We managed to get this building from manufacture onto site ex-Christchurch for just on 4,500 by remaining and designing within transport constraints. So we didn't need police escorts and travel at night and all that sort of thing. Next slide, please. I think a key part of this project, and at this point, I want to mention what a great bunch Maori are to work with. They knew what they were good at. They were happy to take our advice and excellent to work with. But one of the things we recognised very early, we needed to win the neighbours. We needed to win the neighbours and the landowner. And that was very successful because we consulted right from the start and we brought the landowners in to support the resource consent. We had to listen to them. We had to address some of the issues. And as a result, we now have the site fenced on 3 sides. And that was achieved at no cost to the project and with the support of Kāinga Ora, the landowners and the neighbours. I'll say a little bit more about one of the neighbours later. If we can go to the next slide, please. Could we have, thank you. That's a sign, and that shows the extent of the support we had. Every single contractor provided either discounted services and or in-kind services. But I've singled out some as being kind of the major suppliers. Some are large, but some are quite small operations, Steve Ralston and Heafy. But what I want to do is acknowledge them because we always acknowledge the funders. But in a community project like this, some of them came in with the background with Rotary. Others did not have that, but joined the vision. And I thought that was a wonderful demonstration of what can be achieved and what some of the team did. So I guess in there, WSP, Heafy Surveyors, Mitre 10, Portacom were amazing. As were WSP, etc. Sturrock and Greenwood on whiteware, Tim Miller Plumbing, along with Maiko, who's on the sign as well. Asphalt in general, and as I said, Steve Ralston. Can we move to the next one, please? Just before we go into this one, I'll just say the total contribution in discounted services and in-kind support was just on $35,000, which is a remarkable contribution. So delivery day, and this brought the neighbours in again. This is the building having to be lifted over the fence. Because this side is long and skinny, we couldn't actually get the crane truck into a position where it could have loaded it onto piles. And once again, Maiko Wakefield, not only did they help with product and in terms of fencing support, they also let us use the yard to crane the building across. Getting that in, we had 150 millimetres of clearance between the 2 firewalls to slip that in. And as you can see, there's a fence in the way. So we were rather fortunate. Our tallest project team member is 2 metres tall, and he was a tremendous value in being able to get the reach to steady the building and bring it down in with the crane. So I'll just pass on to the next one, if we could, next slide. So Rotary hands-on. And I've got to say, in this project, we've got the elements there of project management, estimating, design, budget control, demolition, deck and ramp, liaison, and also negotiation. And I'm going to mention negotiation because I think, once again, the team member charged with the project had wonderful connections right through the community. And he did an amazing job of bringing people on board. So I think that was very helpful. In terms of Rotary, at the moment, we put in just over 500 hours into this project. That's including hands-on working bees, design, sourcing materials, collecting materials. That's another 50 to 75,000 of savings to the project. Can we have the next slide, please? So you'd think that that was the end. So just to give you an idea, we've really managed to put a building that would have cost in excess of 200,000. We've managed to make that work, completely fitted out with whiteware, heat pump, carpets, vinyls, and we've managed to do that for 100,000. Now, if you consider that a 350 square metre building, or 35 square metre building, sorry, is fitted out as you would a house, that'll put into perspective what we managed to achieve through this project. A tiny house at that size, including putting in decks around it, etc., would be well in excess of that mark. So we've now a slide that says, but wait, there's more. And I think as we developed through this project and got alongside and got to know the mailroom people and worked with the mailroom people, it became apparent with the clients, they like to sit outside, that's what they're used to. And hence we're looking towards the question of some further works, which we are seeking funding for, and that will put in a covered area of sale. Plus also we're going to address further opportunities around the drainage through recontouring the land and landscaping. So a part of that landscaping, there'll be a raised garden for vegetables, etc., which are all not part of the original scope, but we see as essential to making the building and the facility work to its maximum. So that's, I think, the conclusion of what I've got to say. So I'll pass back to Gail.
Thank you. We're nearly there. So I'm here to say thank you. Thank you first to John. He gets very embarrassed when I thank him, but he's been a great project manager. Everything has been covered, as you can probably tell from John's presentation of his reflection. Anything that happened, it was covered off. We had a very small working party, and I think that's probably a key. If you haven't got too many people, you do your bits. But John was well in control. He had to go away for a couple of weeks in the middle of that when we cobbled through, but certainly handy to have somebody in the chair that's a regular person. We just really wanted to show what Rotary can do for our community and working with our community. So that was the key really for driving. Once seeing the need, it was a project that we could work with others on, and John's gone over that. And I also wanted to thank the council for their financial contribution toward the project. So that's my presentation. Thank you. I'll hand back to Tim.
Thank you, John, and thank you, Gail. Hey, we've used up the whole 10 minutes, but if there is, I'll allow one, maybe two questions if they're very brief. Any questions? No, thank you. Thank you. Well, okay, Matt. Well,
So Larry has his hand up.
you're just quick enough. Okay, Matt. And I've got
Thanks,
Vaughn.
Tim.
And
Thanks,
Tim. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, John and Gail. Fantastic presentation. Well done. How many Rotarians all up do you think were involved?
Would you like me to answer that, Gail?
Yeah, you can have a go.
Okay, so probably around 30 overall. We've run several working bees already. We will be running further working bees, plus we had the project team of 5, and that was from across the 4 Rotary clubs. So we picked the skills up from the skills that were across a number of groups. We also had very good turnouts for the working bees that have been done. That's included the decking, it included the removal of the buildings, and also the strengthening and rebuilding of a garden shed type structure, which now is probably as solid as Fort Knox because it needs to be, just so it can't be broken into. It even has a drawbridge, actually.
Awesome.
So,
Brilliant. Hey, I don't suppose you've ever considered building a library?
sorry?
A library?
I think we wore him out on the ferry.
Oh, fair enough.
Thank you.
Just
Thank
on
you for
the,
that.
on the
Thank you
hours
for
for Rotary, the other part was with the funding and the applications and things, there were a lot of Rotarians involved in that too, at different levels, not only in Nelson.
Cool. I'll move over
Great
to
stuff.
Yvonne.
Thank you. Through the chair, I'd just like to take this moment to acknowledge and thank all the Rotarians and everyone that's involved with this project. Having been there from some time from the beginning of my training and seeing the fact that there's connections and there's in-kind and there's passionate people within our industry, I take heart from the fact that Rotarians and Rotary of different clubs have stepped up and taken this project and seen it through to where it is now. And I congratulate all that have been involved and appreciate all the efforts of all. Thanks very much.
Thank you, John and Gail, and thank you. That's a great example of a community and people walking the talk. And we obviously imagine we have lots of people telling us what can be done and should be done. But here's an example of some good Nelson people just getting on with it and getting it done. And it hasn't been lost on us the amount of energies and times and sponsorship and so forth and skill sets to get that done. But thank you very much. Thank you from us all. So I'll move on there. That's the end of public forum. We've just got the confirmation of minutes. Bear with me here. So we've got confirmation of the minutes on pages 8 to 15.
I'll move those, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. That moved by Councillor Courtney. Can I have someone second that? Councillor Brand, thank you. So that's we've moved and seconded it as a true and correct record. I'll put it, so this is a good practice for you. I'll get you to put in, if you go under your reactions and there's a green tick, if you go under reactions and on the left there's a green tick. If you support it, green tick. If you're against it, a red square. Thank you. I'll put it, voted for, carried. It's 7-4 and none against. Thank you. So move now on to Chairman's report. I haven't put anything too formal there. We've had a fairly busy several weeks, and I know we've all been going through and it's affected many more than others with this COVID lockdown. And I appreciate the resilience of the council staff, and I know they've been extremely busy and things carry on. But my heart also goes out to a lot of organisations and businesses which are doing it tough at the moment. I know with the hospitality, I was in a Zoom meeting with a number of hospitalities and accommodation providers, which would really putting their heart out and are just finding it extremely tough. It's come at a time with a lockdown when businesses, hospitality, etc., are just getting through winter, and they survive for winter, and they very much rely on the summer to harvest the hay while the sun shines, as you may put. And then they've hit with this is when they should be, and it's really finding it tough in that. So my heart goes out to that. So I just implore people just to, where they can, be very supportive of businesses in town and families. It's getting tough now for families, and you don't know what they're going through. But I think we will get through this with as a community spirit, and what's been shown in this project demonstrates that. But as I was saying before, been a lot of good works happening. The council later on in this meeting, there will be a presentation from council staff on a lot of the work that has been achieved, an amazing amount of work that council have achieved over this year to date. They'll come there closer to the end of the meeting. But I'd also like to welcome, as I welcomed before, we got our 2 youth councillors, and we, as you know, we often have a verbal update report from youth councillors. So I'll hand it over to Isla and Janvi. If you can hear me, they're right there, and I'll give you the opportunity to give a update from you both. Take it away.
Kia ora. So while the past few months have been quiet due to COVID and exams slowing youth council activity, we have still managed to accomplish a significant amount. Youth council submitted on the Conversion Practices Bill, urging central government to take queer lives seriously. We also prepared a series of short videos for Te Wiki o Te Reo Māori, which we promoted on our social media page. Aside from that, with our regular council involvement in subgroups, Youth Council has managed to remain busy. Our next engagement is in the upcoming Mass Parade and Carnival.
Along with our conversion therapy submission, Youth Council have been working alongside Alan, and we are currently drafting a submission for the City Centre Spatial Plan. As Janvi mentioned, the Youth Council's engagements and activities have been slowed down, but we've also managed to make progress on smaller tasks, such as getting the planning started for recruitment for the 2022 Youth Council. We started advertising that around schools and just getting ready for the whole process. And we are also undergoing a well-being training with Bill. So although we've not been able to accomplish as much as we have liked, we have still managed to do quite a lot. And for the rest of the year, we are continuing our engagement with the Mask Carnival. We also then have our final Youth Council meeting before induction at the end of the year.
Thank you for that. Thank you, Isla and Janvi. I see I've got a question wanting from Councillor Edgar.
Thank you. I was just actually following up on points you raised in your chair's report. Just wanted to mention the NRDA have just launched the We've Got You campaign, which is about that local focus and encouraging local people to support our region, our tourist operators, our shops, our hospitality, because yes, as Councillor Skinner said, there are a lot of people really hurting, particularly the accommodation, hospitality and event sectors, but actually across the spectrum due to delays in shipping delays, labour shortages, cost increases, etc. We actually know that a fair proportion of our community are hurting, and so the We've Got You campaign is something that we can all get behind. And then if I can, just following up on Jarvi's comment about submitting to the legislation to ban gay conversion therapy, it's had a record over 106,000 submissions, which is over double the previous record in New Zealand for submissions. So yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Judine. I've got Trudy and then Nell.
Thank you, through the chair. I just actually want to thank the youth councillors, because some other work that they've actually been doing was actually supporting, I know it's Maori Language Week this week, but later on is coming up the Chinese Language Week, and they helped put together a video and that will be coming out in a few weeks to support Nelson and the sister cities with the Chinese Language Week. So I just wanted to thank the Youth Council for jumping on board with that and really making it quite fun. I saw the snippets that have all put together and with some of the challenges that we faced, but it was a fun activity and I really enjoyed working with Isla on that as well. So thank you.
And I've got Mel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to direct my sort of question to Isla and get her to expand a bit more on her working relationship with the city centre city centre project, and her particularly working with Ellen Gray. So have you had many meetings with Ellen Gray, our officer in charge of that project?
Yeah, so over the past few months, I think for 3 or 4 months, there's been a subgroup of 5 or 6 of us that have attended monthly meetings with Alan. He's been giving us updates and we've seen all the slideshows. He's also been come in and spoken to us as a group, so all of Youth Council are aware of what's going on. And now our project leads for the submission are working quite closely with him to get the final details and have all our questions sorted out before we finalise our submission and send it into council.
So it's been very thorough. You've been involved every step of the way.
Yeah.
That's excellent. Thank you.
Cheers. Thank you for that. Appreciate that presentation. We are now moving on to our first item, which is the adoption of the Community Partnerships Activity Management Plan. This is for the going ahead for the year 21-31. I've got Mark Preston Thomas as a presenter for that.
Good morning. Can everybody hear me okay there?
Yeah, very good. Very good.
Thank you. Well, good morning. You hopefully had the opportunity to read the report that's come through, and also I'll take it as read and welcome any questions.
Very good. So if you've got a question, put the hand up, raise hand icon. Thank you. No, that's obviously a very good report. As always, I've got Councillor Edgar.
Yeah, just a really quick question of clarification. Just in the conclusion 6.1, it says the AMP has been reviewed and amended to reflect all decisions made by the council, but I took it from the body of the report that actually it didn't require any changes.
That's correct. There were no changes made as part of the LGP or other processes from the draft.
Lovely, thank you. Happy
Very
to
good.
move.
Thank you. Thanks for moving, Councillor Edgar. Councillor seconded, Councillor McGurk. So receiving the report and recommendation to council to adopt the community partnerships activity plan. I'll put it, well, if there's no debate, I'll put it. Those in favour, put the green tick. Those against. Thank you. That's unanimous. Thank you. Carried. Thank you, team. So move on to the, let's have a look for, just conscious of breaks, etc. I've got down here for a break and I've been about 40 minutes. Did you guys want to go to the next item or would you like a quick, have a break at the moment? Carry on? Yep, fair enough. Moving on to the next item, which is the adoption of the Arts, Heritage and Events Activity Management Plan. This is going to the years 21 to 31. This is pages 51 to 96. And I've got Mark Preston Thomas, Axel and Sarah presenting. We'll just give a moment for them.
Rema Waimarama, can you please unmute if you're going to be presenting from there?
Yeah, so Sarah Newman-Watt will be introducing this report. We're just waiting for her to join us on Zoom.
Hi, Sarah. You can hear us, Sarah?
There I am. Yes.
Yep.
Sorry.
No, all good.
Thank you.
All good.
So I'm here, Mark. So yes, we are here to recommend the adoption of the Arts, Heritage and Events AMP. I'm hoping you've had it. Yep. Can you hear me?
Yep. Very good.
Oh, it's a bit of a delay. Hang on. Sorry, there seems to be, there you go. I think that'll be better. So we're here to recommend the adoption of the draft Arts, Heritage and Events AMP. I'm hoping you've had an opportunity to read the report and happy to take any questions.
Thank you for that, Sarah. Any questions? I've got Councillor McGurk and Councillor Edgar.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. I just just going through the document. I think it's yeah, in the AMP itself on page 65 of our agenda 7.6, which was the amendment, it talks about 30,000 to produce a post-COVID arts strategy. Is that an additional amount to stimulate the arts sector in the community, or is it something else?
So that is a review of the arts strategy, which is aiming partly to look at building resilience within the arts community post-COVID, but it will also look generally at the arts strategy.
Right, and the other one I've got is, I think, on page 88, 16.7, the steering group for the implementation of the Tā Tonga Taku Ihu strategy. Is that Is that steering group been established yet?
No, it hasn't. It will be established after the adoption of the strategy.
Right, thanks. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just a couple of quick questions. 4.3.9, you mentioned inclusion of the 3.165 for the museum funding, but that was already approved as far as I was aware, and we didn't actually consult on that because we'd previously consulted on that. Can you clarify that?
That's correct. That was omitted from the financials of the draft AMP, and we've now added that in, so that's correct.
Excellent, thank you. And just page 65, 7.6, the art strategy that Brian just mentioned. So does this provide enough sort of direction or detail around the development of strategy? Because elsewhere in the AMP, it mentions that, I think it was 1.8, an investigation of community needs for Community Arts Centre. And I just, from our previous conversations, I thought some of this work was going to be part of the strategy. So I'm just wondering if you can clarify sort of the two, and if we need any clarification in the wording.
So these are two separate projects. The gaps analysis is separate to the art strategy review. The gaps analysis will look at the provision of community arts facilities in Nelson to identify gaps. And so that will be done separately from the art strategy review.
Thank you. And just finally, so at 1.8, it actually says, if I just get there, top of page 60, it says that the gap analysis essentially is looking at a community arts centre. And I thought we had broadened that to make it more just like community arts facility, rather than actually selecting before we do the analysis that it would be a community arts centre, that we would actually let the gap analysis inform us. Is it a community arts centre, or what is it?
Yes, exactly. You're correct. So we will change that wording to be community arts facility, which is more general.
So, Tim, I don't think we need a resolution. I mean, you know, it's one minor couple of word change. You know, I think unless anyone is dreadfully allergic and feels we need a resolution, it could just be noted in the minutes that you know, couple of word change is going to take place. I'll leave it to you.
Thank you for that. And I just checked with staff. Have we got a commentary there that states that if there are any sort of slight adjustments or so forth like that, that can be done by the chair and CEO? Is that right? That's that covered by that?
That resolution isn't in there at the moment.
That's right. That's right. Yep.
Now it is. Wonderful. Thank you.
Cool. And that. So yeah, no. Thank you for raising it. So by all means. Okay, I've got Rohan and then Councillor Courtney.
Thanks, Tim. Kia ora, Sarah. Just on the Taonga Tukuiho strategy, obviously in the AMP we've got those sort of couple of bullet points around supporting the implementation. Do we envision that from that strategy, any significant changes to the AMP might come out of that?
No, the kind of key themes are already outlined in the AMP. So this will be the activity that around that. So no, but we aren't able to add more detail just at this moment until the strategy has been adopted.
Great, thanks.
Yes, Courtney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through to you, Sarah.
Yep.
Sarah, you're no longer, just for my edification, you're no longer the manager of the Founders. You've been elevated to another position.
So yeah, I'm the team leader for Arts and Heritage, but we are still recruiting for the supervisor role at Founders, so I'm still covering that, so I can answer any questions you have about Founders too.
Fine. I want to go back to this 7.6, Sarah, that's highlighted here about the arts strategy. I thought we were already working on one. I thought there was excitement in the community some while ago. Is this 30,000 being used for another piece of work, or have I misinterpreted that?
So this 30,000, we applied for it just at the end of the last financial year, and it is to be spent in this financial year.
On the same strategy, is it still being
so the
completed?
the arts strategy, yes.
Yeah, it's still a work in progress.
Yep.
Great.
Yes.
No, it's an excellent management plan here. It really is. There's an abundance of questions that we could ask all day here because it's so interesting. But you're talking here, and it's very important to share stories and that sort of thing on page 69, and I'm looking at 8.7, and diversify and storytelling and all the rest of it. I can't see anything in here. You may be able to point it to me, to our interpretive panels. Those heritage panels, are they, and who funds those, and where does the work for those come from?
So we fund 2 heritage panels a year, and so we have just gone out to the community to look for suggestions for panels for this financial year, and that's out at the moment and closes at the end of the month. So this year we are funding one which we're working with the Māori Partnerships team, so it will be an iwi focused story, and the second one will be one that has been suggested by the rest of the community.
Yes, thanks for that. How are the spirits in the arts community at the moment? You know, bearing in mind we've been through COVID first and second, and Delta now. I feel personally, I like to know, I want to know from you, not what I feel about it, but how is the spirits in the arts community at the moment in Nelson, please?
So obviously there's a lot of uncertainty, and I think that's kind of the key thing, is what will and what won't happen. Yeah, I can find out some more information for you if you'd like me to, and feed that back.
No, I just think, yeah, I have a strong belief that it would be a turning point for us as far as arts and Nelson is concerned, because arts speak to so many people in so many different ways, and is a very, very important part of building a community. And I think it has been slow in being recognised by Nelsonians over the decades, but now it seems to be coming to the fore. And one of the good things that may come out of COVID.
Yes, I think that the strategy review is really timely from that respect.
Yes, and it could grow and be appreciated even more. And we are putting focus, aren't we, on the city centre development with our arts. Can I be assured of that?
So that obviously is one of the focuses.
For years, I've been asking, on behalf of other people, I might say, for a couple of dedicated, one I've settled for, but I'd like 2, dedicated art spaces in the city centre. So when you say you're collaborating with other sectors of the council, that is one that has been called for a long time, and changing all the time, but just a space dedicated to art, probably sculpture and all forms of art, in say a couple of different places. I'm going for 2 now. I've been going originally for 1, but now I'm talking about 2. 2 in parts of the city. Also, if you're communicating and talking about arts, I have seen years ago, some time ago now, music spots in some very vibrant city centres. And if you could play a part in helping to work with the city centre leader, Ellen Gray, on encouraging coloured spots where they can do their performances spontaneously, if you like, dotted around the city, that would be helpful too. Okay. I'll leave it at that. There's so many others I could ask, but I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Mel. Thank you, Sarah.
Okay.
I think that's all the questions we've got there, and thank you for a good report and the outcome of a number of workshops, etc. So if there's no more questions, I'll get someone happy to move.
I'd like to move. Thank you.
Moved by Councillor Courtney. Can I have someone second it, please?
Second it.
Councillor McGurk. It's moved and seconded. I assume there's no debate. I'll put it. Those in favour. So once again, go to reactions. Put a tick. So those in favour? Very good. That's everyone. I was going to say those against, but it shows very clearly everyone's in favour. I put it. That's carried, I should say. It's carried. Well done. Thank you. That puts us onto the. So we just go on to your reactions and untick. You get opportunity there. So that moves us on to our next item, which is the adoption of the Parks and Reserves Activity Management Plan. That's on pages 97 to 113. And I've got Paul Harrington, the author of that, and I've also got Carol and Rosie online there as well. So I'll just give them a moment to come forth.
Kia ora koutou. We're unmuted, are we?
Can hear you well. Yep.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Similar to the previous two items, this is adopting a final activity management plan. This one's for the Parks and Reserves activity. This is following the adoption of the LTP and also a draft which was adopted a year ago. I'm aware that some other AMPs have had some highlights between that show changes from the LTP between when the last AMP was adopted and this one. The changes from the LTP decisions in this AMP really resulted in very few text changes in this AMP, and the reason for that is that there was often sufficient text in there already around the issue that was being submitted on, and the additions are often against an already quite busy work program. An example of that is the pole vault, which was 18k that was put in. There's 5 or 6 million in that activity over 2 years. So the additional text was pretty minor. It might have been an additional bullet point in a list of projects or something like that. I have listed in the report, page 98 to 99, just those updates, the resolutions from the LTP. And like I said, that might be a simple addition to the project when discussing the issue, and sometimes no change at all if it was just a budget change. And other than that, there has been some general updates in formatting, financial info obviously, and some photographs which are updated as well, and other changes to do with the template. Just another word that Nathan Murray, who was with us at the time, he was the one that drafted up the original one that went to the draft, adopted as a draft. So it has a bit of a different look and feel this time around. We've just arranged it into the format that the other apps are in, just to make them look as similar as possible. So, happy to take any questions.
Thank you for that, Paul. Have I got any questions at the table? No, thank you. Another very good report. What I'll do is, have I got Councillor Courtney?
Sorry, my screen went funny.
Sorry.
I lost sight of you all for a moment.
It's not a bad thing, is it?
Question. You're back now. You're very visual now, actually. You're overexposed, I would say. No, I won't say that. Can I ask Officer Harrington a question? And once again, I find the plan excellent, but I want to take an opportunity, Paul, just to sort of talk about, did we allow any funding for security lighting, particularly at Saxton's Field? I've had a lot of communication from the community following 2 attacks on runners in the vicinity of the Saxton's Field, and perhaps the further just out from there too. But I feel that it possibly is something for the Joint Saxton Field Committee as well to consider, but there is a desire for an increase in security lighting. Have we got adequate funding set aside for that type of security activity, Lee?
Yeah. Through the chair, just to respond to that, yes, at that time of the incident, we did look at the security lighting and CTV. So our contract supervisor that looks after Saxton Field did re-look at what there is there. But certainly I think this is a good issue to bring up with the Saxton Field subcommittee as well, just a continued review of that security there.
Thank you, Rosie. The community will be pleased to hear that. There were actually 2 attacks, so not just one, but I just want to remind you You just said an attack, but there actually were two. So long as we've got that front of mind, and as you suggest, put it forward to the Saxton Field Committee, that would be great. Thank you.
Cheers, Mel. No, we'll do that. Judy and I are on that committee. Matt?
Oh, thanks, Tim. Just wondering, what sort of attacks are we talking about? And were they reported to police?
They were in the media.
They were in the media. Yeah.
They were in the media there. So don't think we need to.
Okay.
I've got nothing more to say about that.
I don't think we need to revisit that. But no, point taken, it's something that has been in discussion on that since unfortunate incidents. Okay, thank you for that. So what we've got here is I'll get someone happy to move it. So can I have the GAs bring that up on the screen just for clarity for public? Because I know what we've got in our paperwork, and there's a slight bit in red there saying regards to if there's any minor amendments. I'll just give people so there's no confusion, and then public know exactly what. I know we've got the privilege of having a paperwork in front of us, and often at formal meetings we've got a screen visual by the gallery, but just thank you for that. So once again, I'll get someone to move it.
I'm happy to move.
Councillor Brand, and have someone second it. Councillor Courtney, thank you for that. I assume there's no debate. Very good. I'll once again go down to directions of those in favour. Green tick. For the moment. Those in favour, I don't think that's unanimous. I was going to say those against, but there's no option against there. That's carried. Thank you. Just lower your reactions on that. Cool. Hey, we will take a break. So I've got, just before we go, we've got the Seafarers Memorial Jetty transfer to asset recommendation. And I'll just check with staff. We've got Mike Smith and Tony Stallard, I think it'll be there. It's been presented by Andrew Pethram. Are we all good to go for that after the break? Cool, very good. So we'll have what would you like, a 5 or 10 minute break? Is that going to be suffice, or 10 minutes? Very good. Okay, we have a 10-minute break. So I make it 10 past 10 back here on the dot. Thank you. Enjoy. Just remember to put mute on. Hello. Hi, Rachel.
Kia ora, Tim.
Also, as probably know, we're just coming out of a break. So we've got through those first 3 items extremely well.
Oh, well done. That's good, fast work. Well done.
You are. Mr. Chair, councillors, we can start whenever you're ready.
Very good. Thank you. I think have we got everyone back? It needs to be back to continue. Check till we've got enough. 5, 6, 7. Okay, all very good. Yep, we'll start. Governance advisors.
Yeah, I had, and councillors, I had invited the solicitor from the trust and the chair to attend.
Thank you.
Just check with them shortly.
Yep.
Short time ago, and they say that they don't need to attend.
Okay.
The content of the report.
Yeah, thank you, and I'll just announce it for the public because we've obviously just come back from our.
Sorry to interrupt him, but I can't hear Andrew. It's very echoey, and I only heard very part. Would you like to tell me what he actually said?
Okay, what I'll do is I'll just announce the beginning of this. So we're at, so for the sense of the public and councillor on table, as you know, we're on to the item Seafarers Memorial Jetty transfer of asset to council, and we've got that on pages 114 and 121, and we've got Andrew Pethram presenting that, and we've also got Claire Button online there as well for answering questions. So Andrew, I'll just get you to start there. I'll just make sure you're close enough to the speaker there in the Zoom room, so we can hear. I could just hear, but please let me know if anyone else can't hear. So thank you, Andrew. I'll just get you to repeat that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, councillors. I have invited the solicitor and the chair of the trust to attend. They have advised this morning that they don't need to attend. They say that they're happy with the content of the report. Can you hear me?
I can hear fine. All good.
Okay, Mr. Chair, councillors, can I assume that you've read the report, and do you have questions?
Thank you, guys. So as I said, the report has been read. I know it's a little bit. There's a couple of, just as you may well be aware, there's a couple of options in the recommendations we've got in front of us, and it's a fairly thorough report there. And have I got any questions? I've got Councillor Edgar. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Look, firstly, and I have sent a number of my questions through, but some of them raised follow-up issues. And I guess so, firstly, I did a search on the Charities Register and the Companies Register of Trusts, and there is no legal entity called the Seafarers Memorial Trust, and we're still referring to a trust chair and a trust solicitor. And the reporting officer confirmed that they are not registered as a trust, so but rather they were a cost centre. So could I have clarification on a cost centre of who or what organisation, the legal status, and probably the legalities of an organisation who's presenting or purporting to be a trust who isn't a trust? I'm quite confused, firstly, about who this entity is if they don't actually exist.
Councillors, yes, I was somewhat confused as well. They tell me that they treat themselves as a trust. They call themselves a cost centre, but they're not a registered trust. And that has come from the solicitor to the group.
Does that make things, is that all good for us, or does that make things that we just got to be a little bit cautious on how we word or utilise this transfer, or is that all just
Councillors, I don't believe it has any impact on us if we are receiving the gift. It is as though we're receiving a gift from any other community group. So I don't believe the fact that they're not a registered trust, I don't think has impact on the conditions of the gift.
Okay, thank you. And I've got questions from go across the top there. Councillor McGurk, Councillor Courtney, and Madam Mayor.
I still haven't finished though.
Okay, and
Thank you.
Far away.
That was my first question. Yeah, I mean, I still feel we need clarification of they're a cost centre of who or what organisation. We need to know actually who we're dealing with. We can't just deal with, you know, nobody. So that needs to be clarified or confirmed. So in the report in 4.2, it said that if the council were to take over the Jetty, it said that the trust proposed to keep funding, or sorry, I won't call them a trust. Anyway, the group proposed to keep funding Blessing of the Fleet event, but they do this by naming rights over the Jetty. So if the council was to take ownership of the Jetty, how would they lever or continue funding the Blessing of the Fleet? Because council has a naming rights policy, and I'm sure we can't just keep giving, you know, we don't just enable organisations to leverage naming rights on things they don't own, on things actually the community would own. So what does that mean for the future of Blessing of the Fleet?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I've asked them that question as well, and they advise that they're in negotiations at the moment with a potential funder, a sponsor for the naming rights, and they would deposit that money into a council account. And the naming rights would be for a 10-year period. They don't want to disclose the name of the sponsor. However, they advise that it would be a sponsor who would be acceptable to the council.
So, I mean, that raises another concern to me. So, you know, what management fees would we have to charge to look after and administer their funds? How would they be accounted for in our books? If these discussions been had with our corporate services staff, and if we were to take over the entity, then I actually think we have 100% say in who has naming rights of what would be a community facility. So have we had any discussions on, firstly, the financial management of this, how those operations work, how they would get accounted for in our books?
They said, Mr. Chair, they said that the money will be deposited in our accounts. They will appoint a separate entity or a group to operate Blessing of the Fleet, and they're only talking about Blessing of the Fleet, and the cost of the annual Blessing of the Fleet event would then be drawn from the council held assets.
Sorry, I think Mr. Pether maybe didn't quite understand my question. My question was, have we talked to our corporate services, our accounting staff, on how it would be accounted for in our books and what it would cost to administer these funds?
No, we haven't.
Okay, thank you. I note in 4.4, the resource consent expired 11 years ago. So it hasn't, it's not a renewal of a consent. And this lends itself directly to some of the proposed costs in here, because in the resolution talks about renewal. So it's a lapsed consent, so it would be a new consent since 2000 or 2010. There has been quite a significant number of legislative changes around the coastal marine environment, New Zealand Coastal Policy Statement, etc. So have we had some advice either through our regulatory team, our environment staff, management, or through independent people as to what this may entail, because I also, you know, there is also discussions to be had with iwi around this. So a renewal versus a new consent are really different things and have very different costs. So have we had some, have staff had discussions with our regulatory team, our consenting staff?
So through the chair, perhaps I can assist here in terms of responding. There has been a very high level conversation about what may be required for the consent. To give a bit of background, the coastal permit expired in June 2010. When the original application was made, the term that was sought was for 35 years and only a 10-year consent term was granted by the Commissioner. So there was a hearing process and the Commissioner granted 10 years only. There was iwi input at the time, but to go to the question that Councillor Edgar has asked, in terms of the process going forward for a new consent, there is new legislation, the Marine and Coastal Areas Act, which does add another layer in terms of iwi involvement in any consenting process. And certainly iwi would be deemed to be affected parties, highly likely in any consent process. So depending on where that ends up, it could involve another hearing process, which was what was originally dealt with for the original consent.
Thank you for that. So just if I can follow on. So currently we have an unconsented structure. So if council suddenly agreed to take it on, we would then share the liabilities of that and any risks of that unconsented structure if anything happened in the interim.
So through the chair, if you're taking on a structure that's not consented, there is a requirement to, yes, absolutely make sure that it's then lawfully able to continue, and that would require a consent process. I can also outline that in terms of the Building Act process, because there is that other element to it as well, that consent was granted for a building consent in 2000, that no building warrant of fitness is required for that structure. And at the time, there was no code compliance certificate required for that structure under the legislation that existed then. But going forward, we would just need to look at that again if there, in terms of the resource consent and seeing if there's any changes under the Building Act, if there's going to be any changes to the structure. So absolutely, council would then need to make sure that we authorise the structure in every avenue that is required.
Thank you. So one of the other questions.
Sorry, just a moment there, Councillor. I've got Anaru Ma wanted to comment. Yes.
Thanks. Through the chair. The report does not recommend taking on an unconsented structure. The report recommends taking on a structure that is consented with the consent to be achieved by the group, and recommends if council wants to contribute funding towards the group getting that consent.
Okay, thank you. But we've got no independent costings of a new consent at this stage.
I've questioned the solicitor for the trust, and he has tried to determine, he's spoken with the planner, they are offering to manage the consenting process. They will do that, but no, until we know what's who's involved, we really can't give an accurate assessment. His opinion was that my assessment of 20,000 being 50% max from the council was on the high side.
Yeah, that might be for renewal. Okay, so we had a legal review of this proposal, because there are quite a few different elements to this that are coming to light. So have we had a legal review?
Mr. Chair, Councillor, no, not as such. Our legal people have looked at it, but just through the normal process of preparing a report.
Right. Okay. So this came as a submission to the LTP, but according to the report, some work had already been done before it even came to council, and some expenditure was made. So can you clarify, is that normal process that before council have even considered or even heard about a project, that money is spent on a project and work is done? I would have thought that we would at least, have a meeting first and then decide if we want to proceed.
Mr. Chair, Councillor, yes, that's normal procedure. If we expect council to be asking us questions, particularly through the LTP process, that we need to be able to answer those questions. So we sought advice from the engineer who does our assessments as to what the potential costs we could be in store for, so that the council was then able to make that decision if need be at the LTP. So yes, that's normal procedure.
Okay, so what budget does that come out of? I mean, because we didn't ask any questions as part of the LTP process. So but so what budget does that come out of, and when do we get to sort of set those budgets?
It's in the estimated reserves account, and it's an account which we use for assessments of bridges and structures. So this would be an appropriate charge against that account. So
the assessment has been of the jetty, and has there been an assessment of the retaining wall? And what's the condition of that? Because that's probably one of the greater potential liabilities or cost elements going forward.
Councillors, yes, there has been an assessment of the wall. The wall is not in good condition. It's spalling. That means that the steel structure is rusting and popping through the concrete coating. It's been measured over the last few months or a year, and it's not moving. It's stable, but in summary, it's not in good condition, and we're currently preparing a business case as to its future. So, thank you, Chair. I'll just ask one last question. It doesn't mean I don't have sort of about 2 million more inside my head, but so in the costings that you've prepared in the report, they only reflected the jetty and cleaning and the statue. So has there been any long-term financial analysis about the retaining wall, the repairs, insurances, future resource consent renewals, any conditions that might be there? Because it sounds like, I mean, the sort of, 152 to 337 over 10 years based on cleaning and deck maintenance is actually a drop in the bucket as to what this actually could cost council and the community. Mr. Chair, councillors, we based our costings on the figures that we got back from a person from Stantec, and our engineer built in an additional amount for contingency. That includes renewals and any maintenance of the structure itself, but it does not include work on the wall. Work on the wall is a huge project, separate, and this structure is independent of the wall.
Okay, I'll leave it there, Mr. Chair, but I might need to ask some more, but thank you.
Thank you for that. I'll hand it back over to Anaru Umar or Andrew White. Then I see we maybe have some legal advice if need be, but I'll get Andrew, please jump in if you think there's something just need a bit of clarification, because I'm concerned that we might be answering some good questions, but then we also might be going off a little bit of a tangent. But there's some very good points made there. Obviously, in this transfer, is it as complicated as it sounding, or is it actually quite simple?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and they're very good questions. Thanks, Councillor Edgar. One thing Andrew I don't think Andrew made quite clear, and correct me if I'm wrong, Andrew, but the wall is already a council asset, which protects the reserve. So it's already an item that council has to deal with. Ms. McLeod is here as well. If Fiona, you want to jump in at any point around any comments you've got around the legal questions that Councillor Edgar and others may raise.
Fiona, is there anything there that, and where the questions are leading, that you think we might just need a little bit of clarification on it, or?
I've joined the meeting partway through the questions. The main legal issue, I mean, this report hasn't had a detailed, or this proposal hasn't had detailed legal advice, but it is a report which I saw as a part of our usual SLT peer review process. And at that stage, the main issue that I focused on was the legal risk of the council taking on an unconsented structure. That was the most significant legal risk from my perspective, and the officers have addressed that on the basis that the council would only be taking on the structure subject to the trust obtaining resource consent. So that's really been the only focus of my legal consideration.
No, thank you. So it clarifies there shouldn't be a concern if we go taking that option of the consent, etc., taking its place. However successful, unsuccessful it is, before we take it on board. By all means, if it is unsuccessful, then we're not taking it on board. Is that right? And I'll hand over. There's a few questions. I'll push along, but we'll keep in consideration. I'll push along. I've got McGurk, Courtney, Rees, Bowater, Noonan. Okay, Councillor McGurk first.
Unmute. Yeah, a lot of the questions that I had have already been asked by Councillor Edgar, but one that I really would like to know is the I suppose the legal status of the organisation that we're dealing with, or what kind of legal person are we dealing with? At the moment, just seems to be an amorphous bunch of people, so I really would like that a question around that sort of clarified. The other one was, yeah, aware of the difficulties with doing any kind of work in a coastal marine environment, but probably a question to Ms. Barton is there anything particularly problematic with the proposal that we've got that she can see? I'm well aware of the difficulties we've got, but if there's anything that would be any unknowns that we don't know, or what don't we know that we would like to know?
So through the chair, I can answer the second question if you would like now. Both Ms. Bishop and I have looked at the existing structure, and we've looked at what was granted in 2010. While there is new legislation in play, which is the Marine and Coastal Area legislation, we think that if iwi are on board with the proposal, then the consent will be relatively straightforward. So it really comes down to iwi feedback and the consultation that is undertaken with them.
Okay. Yeah, I'll just leave it there. I think Ms. Kelly has asked pretty much all the questions I was going to ask. So
Thank you. I've got Courtney, Rees, Bowater, Noonan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Andrew, I'll just digress a little and go to something that sort of caught my attention. You said the future is being assessed in relation to, was that the Seafarers Memorial? Or what was it? What was you referring to when you said, was it the Seafarers Memorial Jetty, or what? Can you explain, please? Help me understand that.
Councillors, you may have been referring to work that we need to do on the seawall. We are currently preparing a business case to bring back to council on the condition and the future of the seawall.
Okay, fine. It wasn't the jetty.
No, councillors, we've had an assessment by Stantec on the condition of the jetty, and the details of that and renewals requirements are included in the report.
All right. I think you've answered that for me. We need to remember, don't we, Mr. Chair, that this whole asset we've got down there, the wall, the jetty, that is incredibly popular with our community, was born out of the community, to be perfectly honest with you. Well-known, respected people, and a tremendous amount of money was contributed by the community to this. So when we talk about trusts and organisations that are involved in this and how we get too legal about this, we lose what the original spirit and where this came from. It came out of the community. And these people are telling us now, Mr. Chair, that they're unable to continue to maintain the Seafarers Memorial Jetty, and they're asking for us to take it over. Are we delaying it? Are we delaying this decision by legalising it and looking at it in this way? Because shouldn't we just be taking over the application, the consent application, and getting on with the job?
I'll answer your question, Mel. So no, this is why we've got the report here, and some good comments made. But I do pick up, and I probably concur with you, and Fiona or Andrew might be answer that in regards to it being a cost centre or a trust. Is that something we should really be concerned about? That's how they operate. We're taking over the jetty, we're not taking over an organisation. Is that really something we should be getting too concerned about? And should we be getting too concerned about this handover because we set in place the fact that all consents, etc., would need to be done before we'd accept transfer? But saying that, I see we've got to make sure we're doing due diligence, and that's why we're here today. And I've just a response from either the two Andrews or Fiona. Am I looking at that right? Because that's I understand the question's been brought up by Councillor Edgar, and which made some good points, and McGurk and Courtney empathise with that maybe we are making it a little bit complicated. But on the other hand, are we missing something here? Are we making this too complicated? Should it just be an easy transfer? They do the consent goes ahead, we take it on. If it doesn't go ahead, we don't take it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think if we're going to talk about the legal elements around that, I think it's we should adjourn and go into public excluded to discuss that.
Okay. Well, before I do that, I'll go through a few questions from those at the table, and then I
haven't finished
get a
yet,
bit of advice from Ed Weaver. Sorry?
I haven't finished yet.
No, that's all right. So okay. Well, I'll let you have another question, but I was just answering that question. But thank you, Councillor Courtney. I'll get you to answer another question. So after Councillor Courtney, we'll go through. I know there's some very patient hands up there. We'll get those done, and then we'll assess where to go from there. Thank you, Councillor Courtney. But we'll keep the questions fairly concise.
Well, yes, righto. That's good. I heard it. I heard what you said just then. Keep the questions concise. Yep. So I will repeat again what I said before. Why don't we pick up this resource consent and run with it? It seems inevitable that we're going to be taking this over, this asset, this very popular community asset, and we are just delaying it by saying, well, and getting all legalistic, because this was born out of the community. That's my point, and I want a reaction from somebody, please, to that question. And I think probably, I don't want to tell anybody who should answer it. I think that's rude, quite frankly, when you do that. So I'll just put it out there. Why don't we just pick it up and run with it and face up to it? These people have done it for 2 decades. No, it might be a decade, is it? 2 decades? 2000. Anyway, for a long time, and a tremendous amount of money came from the community. I won't repeat it again, but why don't we just take it and work with it, run with it, apply for the resource consent and get on with the job, for goodness sake. So can someone answer that, please?
Okay, so I sort of partially answered it, but put through the same question there, and the response was that we may need to go out of space here to get some legal advice. So let's hold that question. It's a very good question, Councillor Courtney. I just see Andrew Anarumar just put his hand up there. Did you want to comment on that?
Yeah,
I'd be delighted if he would.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I don't change my advice about discussing legal in public excluded. However, staff have made a recommendation on which is our best advice. If the committee decides it wants to make another decision, the committee can do that.
Okay, so let's hold that
I
question.
won't have any more questions. I'll curtail my. I'll leave it at about one question and let someone else have a go.
And we can come back round. So let's just fire through some more. But the good point, we'll hold that for a moment. Thank you. I've got Madam Mayor Bywater Noonan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And look, I concur with Councillor Courtney. This is just a much loved part of Nelson, and one of my favourite events is the Blessing of the Fleet. I just want to come to this question about the entity, and I'm really confused because I'm looking at the resource consent that was granted, and I'm reading from the resource consent, which is in the name of the trust, and the Chairman of Trustees, Mr. Faulkner, is answering questions to the Commissioner, and he is talking about the trust objects are not confined to this project. So he's referencing objects of a trust document. So I'm wondering whether did the trust exist at some point and now it no longer does?
Mr. Chair, Madam Mayor, my understanding from Tony Starr, the solicitor, he describes them as a private trust, an unregistered trust, and a cost centre. I'm afraid I can't give you any more information on that.
All right, well, that's probably getting us a little bit closer to understanding what we're dealing with here, Mr. Petheram. So if there is a deed, then we do need to know what the objects of the trust are. So that's very important information for doing something here. Fairly basic piece of information, I think, for us to be able to make an informed decision. I do want to understand that were the officers aware that the structure did not have a current consent, that it's an unconsented structure?
From the Mr. Chairman, Madam Mayor, from the parks perspective, it wasn't our asset, so we weren't aware of the details related to that. No.
So when did we become aware of the fact that it's an unconsented structure, and how did we become aware of that?
Prior to the LTP, when they made their submission, their request through the LTP process.
So the lawyer for the private trust was aware that this was unconsented?
I got that information from, I sought that out from our planning and consents people.
Right, so question, probably a follow-up question for Ms. Barton. So Ms. Barton, why have we got a coastal permit that has had an expired consent, has had an expired consent for 11 years? Why have we got that? As this is a regulatory question, so why are we not fulfilling our monitoring? You know, why do we not understand, have this information to hand, and making sure that we've been compliant? Because I see this commentary in here that if council was to take over the structure, an abatement notice would be served, but it shouldn't really matter whether it's council or anybody else, should it?
No, so through the chair, if I can respond to that. At the time that the coastal permit expired in June 2010, we didn't have a data system that allowed us to pull up expiry dates, which is what we've currently got. We've recently got that. So in 2010, there was no consent conditions requiring monitoring of this. And that was the historic way that we would have reminded somebody that their consent was about to lapse, was if we were out there monitoring, we would then remind them. So the data system has now been improved in the last wee while. So we now know if things have expired. That happened at around the same time that we had found out about this particular issue. We do know we've had notice probably in the last 8 months or so of a couple of other structures that we need to follow up in terms of coastal permit and occupation. We have prioritised other compliance issues over the top of those, given that those activities are already in existence, and they're not some ongoing effects, but it's certainly on our work program to prioritise those areas. And in terms of an abatement notice, the question around an abatement notice, the first step that we always do when we're aware of a compliance issue is we look at what the options are. And in this particular situation, it would be that our advice would be authorise it through a resource consent, and we would ask them to do that within a timely period.
Thank you. If just a question, just to understand this a little bit better. So if you are asking, so I guess this is, there's got to be some sort of entity to apply for a consent, surely. So I'm just puzzled. Again, this comes back to this issue of what entity are we talking about here? You do need a person or a legal entity, don't you, to apply for a resource consent?
Yes, through the chair, that's correct, you do. I don't know what was traversed at the hearing in 2000 when the hearing actually was around that, and whether questions were asked about the entity. It's not evident from the decision of the Commissioner that that was specifically addressed, but certainly in terms of applying for a consent, there needs to be a lawful entity of some description that the consent is then tagged to.
Okay, thank you. Well, to all intents and purposes, it looks as Mr. Stallard, a trustee of the applicant and also the trust solicitor, and we're talking of chairmen of trusts and objects. It does appear there is some trustee somewhere that needs to exist. Look, I've only got one other comment, Mr. Chair, or question. So I've read in the report that there's been no engagement with iwi in preparing this report, and I just want to show, am I correct on that? I just want to make sure that I have understood that correctly.
Yes, that's correct.
Right, Mr. Chair, look, I'm just going to signal to you now that that is so fundamental to how we as a council operate, is that we engage with iwi on matters that are of significance to iwi before we make decisions as council. This is clearly of significance to iwi. We know that, and that's been identified by the officers, but we have had no engagement. And as Mayor, I have to say that does not sit well with me in council decisions. That's not the way that we have agreed to operate and honour the treaty partnership. And I would be very reluctant to make a decision on this today in the absence of that, in the absence of discussion with our finance staff, where the naming rights policy isn't being followed, where we haven't sought independent planning advice to get the costs, and a number of other matters. I am absolutely supportive of retaining the structure. It's so important to Nelson, but let's do it the right way in an informed way. The other matter, Mr. Chair, is that I'm very reluctant is for council to start resolving matters and giving direction for entities to renew resource consents. That is a regulatory matter. When it gets to the point where council elected members are making those decisions, that's for me is absolutely crossing the line in terms of the roles at council. It is not our role. So I really think this needs to lie on the table until some of these matters are sorted out, to do this the right way, do it right and honour the people that this memorial is there for. And I agree with Buzzford in the decision when he talks about this. This is not just honouring our fishers from Nelson. This is actually for all seafarers throughout New Zealand. And actually, it's a national memorial. And we should be going to look for some funding from the government for this one. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah. So in response to that, and then we may, but I'm happy to listen to more questions. We may end up putting it on the table. We may go ahead with one of those options, and we may need to go into public excluded for a sort of legal privilege on that. But just in defence, what you're saying, we have had this organisation come to us with Tony Stallard and Mike Smith earlier on. They offered us, they put this to us, and this is where we have done a bit of diligence and coming back before we haven't decided where we're taking on, and that's why it's come in this report whether we would want them to do a consent renewal, and that may well be part of that iwi discussion. So I don't fully accept that we have sort of skipped a step or avoided discussions with iwi or consent, etc. I think we're responding to an offer that was put to us some months back by that organisation, and then we've taken heed and got this report come back, and we've discovered a few things here and say, hey, before we take on this on board, we would need to decide on the process then that they would get a consent and any iwi discussion. So I don't think it's actually come about, we've skipped necessarily on that, but some points taken there. And on the other,
debate with you, but I'm going to be really clear about this. If we think as a council, the way we engage with iwi, we do it through regulatory processes, that's our step, then we are falling so far short of what we should be doing as in terms of our treaty obligations. We as a council engage at a governance level with iwi, and we need to do that on matters of significance before we make decisions.
And that's what we may well definitely do. This is what we've got the report here, but point taken. So this is where we're at. Well, we've got a number of options here, and it may be a case that we lay it on the table. But before we decide that, I'll go to the other questions on that, and then if we do need to go into legal privilege, or need to lay it on the table because I think we need to be some more diligence and communication with all parties, that's what we will do. So I've got Councillor Bowater and Councillor Noonan.
Thank you. Most of my questions have been asked and answered, and I have, from the questions and comments made, I'm feeling that, as with the Mayor, I was going to actually ask if it was something we should lay on the table, or what we were going to do with this, and I came to the conclusion that I would be more comfortable after we've actually had our public exclusion to discuss around the legal ramifications and all other consulting parties that we need to discuss with. So I will brief. I'll just wait until after we've had our public excluded time on that one. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And I'll go to Councillor Noonan, but what I'll give an option for questions were in public, and I'll also like to follow up on also Councillor Courtney's question in regards to are we trying to make it a little bit complicated or not. But hand it over to Councillor Noonan. You had a question?
I've got a couple of questions. Thank you. I'll just address the idea of letting the item lie on the table, and the question is, if we let it lie on the table, does that restrict the ability to actually add more information to the report? Because there's a lot of questions that need some, I think should be responded to in a report. So would that mean that can we then investigate a lot more?
I'll ask Andrew White.
I might defer to the GAs on that one.
So the question there is, if we lay it on the table, does that enable us to add to this report to come back to?
Chair, it can, when it comes back and come back as a new report, you can have this report, you know.
I'll just get you, sorry, I'll just get you to come a bit closer to the microphone. We're not picking that up.
Oh, apologies. Through the chair, when it comes back to the meeting, it can have new information. You can have a new report with the additional information you have, and this report can go into the appendix as an example. So yes, definitely you can bring new information.
Thank you, that's helpful. So my questions now, thank you, that's good. Just if we go there, I'd like to know that we can actually leave the door open for extra information to be included. Look, we've heard that that a consent may need a hearing. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. We've heard that an application for a consent may require a hearing. What did the last hearing of this nature cost? I just don't, I have some questions over the 40,000. I was thinking it was going to be more like over 100,000. Can somebody from our resource consent side give me a response to that, please?
So through the chair, Councillor Noonan, it will very much depend on the consultation that is undertaken with iwi and how that goes. So if it goes smoothly, then there won't be a need for a hearing. However, if there are issues that are raised and it needs to proceed to a hearing, there'll be confined issues, but there's still going to need to be traversing the legal issues around the Marine and Coastal Areas Act and various other things. So ballpark could be around 30 to 40, okay. But there'll also be costs associated with the preparation of it, the iwi engagement and various other things, and I haven't factored that in, but yeah.
Okay, thank you. So I think in the original, I probably should ask this as a question because I don't think everybody had the answer, because I asked some questions which we responded to. I think, can you tell us, I think iwi gave consent for a limited period, and then it looked like it stopped after 10 years. So can we have some explanation on how that might affect this, please?
So through the chair, when the matter was put in front of the commissioner in 2000, there was submission from iwi, and they said that the application term should be 10 years rather than the 35 years that was applied for. So the consent was granted only for a 10-year term.
So when that was granted then, was it anticipated that they would demolish it after 10 years? I don't understand why you would put something up that was so valuable that's just for 10 years. And you may not be able to answer that, but it might just need to be resounded amongst others.
So through the chair, they'll need to balance the public benefit from such a structure with the issues that iwi had raised, and 35 years is an unusually long term for occupation of a coastal space. So coastal space issues, they are normally of a shorter term and duration, with the expectation that they would then apply if need be for another consent to allow for further occupation going forward.
Okay. I'll just check and see whether that was all my question. I think there's quite a lot that's been really helpful listening to the questions this morning. The only other comment I've got, and I don't know whether anybody can help me with this, is there seems to be some confusion about who we're actually dealing with, and it's not normal to have people come to us and we don't know who they are. We know who one person is, but it just seems, should we not know a little bit more about who we're dealing with? Or does it not matter?
So someone else say, I mean, that might be a case of question raised before by Councillor Courtney, and I had a bit of empathy for that. Are we making it complicated for ourselves? Do we need to know more about their organisation, or do we not? But is that something that becomes legal privilege? Is there anything we can answer on that without going to public excluded, or do we need to go in public excluded to answer that? Because I'm on the similar, we're talking about a jetty being handed over. We're not talking about taking over a particular organisation's trust or board. That's their business. But am I missing something there that there's some implications? I know Madam Mayor raised in regards to that, and us better understanding exactly what their deed items are, that they're more than just this in their deed items. Is there more to it? But is that something of our business? Do we need to know that? There. So that might be a question for Andrew White or our legal. But let me know if we need to go to public excluded for that.
I guess I'm saying that it's unusual that we don't know who we're dealing with. Maybe I'll just leave it at that.
Well, and I might be being a bit naive and ignorant, but we had the members come to us and explain what they had, the item that they're wanting to hand over and who they were, and they explained it who they were. But is there any more that we need to?
We only had one person, didn't we?
We had Tony Stellard, and was it someone else came, or was it Mike Smith? But can I get staff to answer?
Thank you.
That, I mean, I don't make it more complicated than it needs to be, but then we've got to make sure we've done due diligence on this.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So there were two members of the group who were available to be here today. They may still come to be part of the discussion, but it would be the public excluded part of it. I think I haven't heard back from the staff whether they can attend or not, but that may be quite helpful to talk to them directly if the committee wants certainty around what sort of organisation they are. My impression and my understanding is that they're not a trust, they're not a society, they're not a formal organisation in that nature, and but they are a group of people with responsibility for an asset that they want to, they have requested to transfer to council.
Okay. And I have one last question, if that's okay, and it's regarding the seawall. And the question is the consent? It seems that the jetty itself is okay. Do we have an obligation to repair the seawall to enable this to continue to stand? Have we got some contingent? Do we have to fix the seawall so this actually jetty can remain where it is?
Mr. Chair, councillors, no, we don't. It's an independent structure, so we can take possession of this irrespective of what we do with the seawall.
Okay, thank you for that. So I'd still like to come back to the question of Councillor Courtney, etc. Are we making this more complicated? I get some comfort, but maybe it's wrong to have some comfort. I've got some comfort in the fact we've got in the recommendation number 2, whichever one we choose, or one we choose at the organisation, the cost centre group or trust, private trust, go through the process of a consent and the cost of that, and all being good, then we know that their offer is on the table, and then we'd obviously by all means have the discussions that we need, and the rightly brought up about discussion at iwi, etc. Is it as simple as that? I mean, I like to think that's it. I'm a bit worried that we're making it so complicated that they walk away and say, well, actually, we're not going to hand it over, and we have egg on his maybe egg on our face, to use a term offered up from the public. But once again, I don't want us to rush something, but on the other hand, I don't want us to complicate something here. So I don't know, there's a bit more clarity on that from Andrew or Fiona. Are we quite well protected? I'll put it simply, are we not put it out there, are we not just protected? We've got option 2, it's we'd only take over this transaction once the organisation, whoever they call themselves, and that's their business, go through the due diligence, the process of consent, etc. And that's obviously going to be iwi discussions. And then by all means, when that's been, hurdles been cleared, then we say, okay, the offer is available, and we have those further discussions of iwi saying, hey, we're intending to take on this ownership. Isn't that not just that protects us from all that in regards to consent and process and cost?
I don't think there is a critical reason why the committee would need to make a decision today.
Okay.
I think there would be a preference from the group that the committee would make a decision so they knew where they stood. If the committee decides that the need for further information puts it in the position where it can't satisfactorily make the decision today, we will take that away and we will provide that further information. So that's your call. Members have raised a number of questions that they feel are significant that still need to be dealt with. So you just need to work through that.
Okay, thank you for that. And I've got a couple of questions here. I've got just going to the top of my screen, Judine and then Rachel Rees.
Thank you. Yeah, so following on from Andrew's comments, they've already been told, I think I took from what Claire Barton was saying, that, you know, they've already been told that they need to get a new consent. So, you know, that entity has to actually comply with that. Yep. That's totally separate to this. So yep. Is there any reason why they can't start going through the process of the consent, start doing their regulatory engagement with iwi, for example, while we then go through a process of having our due diligence? Because at the end of the day, this is, you know, ratepayers' money that we're talking about. This is liabilities we're talking about, and our job is to do due diligence before making decisions. And so we could then, while they start that process independent of us, because it's one they legally are required to do anyway, then we could get, you know, the answers to the other questions, because we also can't give them any assurances that they could have naming rights that enables the blessing of the fleet to continue, and all of a sudden councils, the people who destroyed blessing of the fleet because there's no funding, because it isn't in alignment with our naming rights policy, well, then we wouldn't be very popular either. So, you know, there actually is a lot of things we need to do, because if they're relying on that and it turns out we can't do it, or if there is no ability for corporate services to be able to account for someone else's money and hold it, that also puts at risk what the arrangement is. So, you know, it's not actually just about what we might undo for us, it's what we might undo for them if we don't do the due diligence. So can't they just go do the resource consent that they legally have to go and do, and we go and do due diligence on all the other matters that were raised. That isn't
Okay.
it is a question.
No, thank you. Did someone answer that? Andrew?
I think that is a critical point around the resource consent, which as a number of us have already talked about, for council to make the statement that council will not be applying for the resource consent, and that it's actually up to the group to apply and achieve the resource consent. That's a critical item here, because I think their first request was that we would take it on and then apply for the resource consent. So if there was any guidance that I felt strongly that we really did need to get out of this meeting, it would be the direction that that the group needs to achieve the resource consent.
Okay. Before I try and answer that, I'll hand over to Rachel Brian McGurk in regards to questions.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not so much sure this is a question. It's one I just have to ask the question really of the committee is, this is an important asset that most people in Nelson would assume it is a public asset. I'd be correct in that. Most people would assume that they would have no knowledge about what's sitting behind this. So see this as a public asset, and one that we'd want to retain, one that's of value, and we need to sort out the naming rights matters that Councillor Egger's been talking about, and make sure that the, if the leasing of the fleet event is going to be sustainable. So we want this to be a success. I think my problem with this today is that we're taking a very hands-off transactional approach to something that we want to make a success, and we need to get some. No, we're not slowing it down to slow it down. We're taking the steps to actually do something right to get the outcome of retaining a really well, loved public facility that has an absolutely important, critical part of our social, cultural calendar for the year, with the blessing of the fleet. And we want to do this well, and we tend to do those things well when they involve iwi. When we work in partnership with iwi, and we actually are part of that's what's going to be the outcome. I feel this matter should really have been on the iwi council partnership agenda. That's where I think it's, there should be that conversation. Our role is not to say to you go away and get the resource consent. Because I have to ask the question, would we be submitting in support of the resource consent? Would officer like to turn their mind to that and answer that one for me? If we want this to be a success, would we be submitting to the resource consent and support?
Thank you. Well,
it's a question.
Yeah, I hear that. So I just think if someone wants to respond to that, Andrew,
I'll try to respond to that. I don't know the answer to that question at the moment. I don't know if Mr. Petheram does.
Mr. Chair, councillors, I think that we would be submitting in support. It's a very well-loved facility that the community appreciates, and I think as a council we would get them behind to ensure that it continued to function as a very popular recreational facility. So yes, I believe that the council should submit.
Thank you. In that case, Mr. Chair, that's even more of a reason for us to engage early, because the last resource consent, even way back in 2000, when that's a whole different world of understanding of treaty relationships. Even then, there was the submitters were working together to try and get an outcome. So I'm sorry, I can't approach this today as council being a hands-off exercise. We want this to be retained in public ownership. We want the support of iwi, and we have a critical role to play, and we need to do it from the beginning, not as just part of a regulatory process. I really would like the chance to be able to build that relationship to get this in the right place.
Well, before I test the committee on there's a couple of options there I have that we may do, can I just ask, so obviously the organisation came to us, may have been the expectation and wish that we take it, the ownership, transfer it over to us, and then we go on that process of consent. But I see we obviously got the option that they do that process. Andrew and Andrew, are they happy? Would they be happy just testing it? Are they happy that if we just hand it to say, hey, we're not having a bar of this yet till you've gone through that consent process and renewal? Are they happy to do that fully? or they're expecting us to come to the party. I know in the report it says they're expecting us to come to the party because of in kind of what they put into it, which makes a lot of sense anyways. But are they happy to say, hey, we're not going to make a decision on this? You go ahead, get the consent, and then come back to us.
Mr. Chair, councillors, I think that they want to know that we support them, that we support the structure, and I think they would expect us to go forward together.
Okay, cost-wise and process.
That's correct.
Okay. I think I'll pick and I'll go next questions here. I'll go across who was next. I've got, was it Councillor Councillor Noonan, were you? I'll go Councillor Noonan, McGurk.
No, I've got a suggestion.
Well, I've got a couple before you go ahead. So it might be a case of I'll test the waters here. We've got a couple options here. We can defer this whole we can defer this whole item to another meeting, and we do a bit more due diligence on that, or we let it matter lie on a table. Just let me read this, and enable the organisation to do their bit, and we go ahead and do our bit. And as Andrew said, there's no absolute urgency on this.
Tim, can I request a breakout room, please?
Okay, in regards to a breakout with
Councillor Edgar, the Mayor, yourself, and Officer White, please.
Yeah, could I have a second question at some point? Just
before we go
into breakouts and huddles and things.
Yeah, just before before we go into breakouts, I'm not sure if we need a breakout, but I'll just quickly, I've got McGurk, Courtney, Laurie, just fire away through those before. I do want to get an expression from the committee if we want to push ahead on those options, or I tend to believe it's probably a greater view here that we put it lay on the table. We either lay on the table, get more information back, or there was a suggestion by Councillor Edgar that we let them carry on with their process and we do our process. And I've got a couple of motions possibly that can go on the table on that. So I'll just let McGurk, Courtney and Laurie fire away some questions there, and we'll test the meeting before we go out any breakouts. I'm not a huge fan of the breakouts unless it's something.
Well, I'm curious to know whether what I'm thinking is doable. That's all. And I just thought I would.
Well, did you want to ask that now, or do you want to ask some legal advice, or did you need an officer to answer that?
Well,
no,
I can ask it now if you like, but I thought you were putting other options. But it's a suggestion. Is another option. That's all.
Yep.
You want me to
throw us that now? Throw us that now. That's on the mix. Yep.
Okay. So, I mean, in a move to move forward, and actually, I think that we want to retain this Jetty because it's important to the community. I do have a question of whether we could receive the report and give a grant to the entity to go ahead and get the resource consent. Because that has to be done anyway. The consent has to be done. The only issue I've got with it is I'm not sure who the entity is that we'll be giving the grant to, and that applies even with the proposal that's in front of us. We're being requested at 2 to approve unbudgeted funds of up to 20,000 towards the resource consent. So if we're going to send them off to do it, I guess the question, and why I wanted to go into the breakout room, is to find out how that could work.
Hold it there. I've got McGurk, Courtney, and Laurie. Just want a couple of questions before we decide to lay on the table or so forth.
Tim, yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. There was a question I sort of had earlier that I've got to ask. I know that the detailed business case for the Nelson Future Assets study has been locked in for the next 3 years. I'm just wondering, do we have an understanding of this particular precinct and the location, the impact that might have on has there any thought been given about how this will fit in with the work that has to go on with that detailed business case? Because we're probably having to make an investment in the area, and I'm thinking sort of taking a sort of a longer term view about what that might look like. So I suppose that's rather than just sort of picking something up and within a year or two it's there are changes. So is that actually featured in any of the thinking that's gone on? Probably not.
Silent answer. Silent radio silence there.
Yeah.
Andrew, is there any answer to that? Either Andrews?
I feel like I'm stepping in for Andrew a bit here, but I'm not aware of any consideration of that, and it's certainly not covered in the report.
Okay, no, that's as expected. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Courtney, Councillor Laurie.
Officer Petheram, you've been working closely with these people. I won't say anonymous because you know about them, you know them. Have they got the ability, do you think, to fund the resource consent application in part?
Mr. Chair, I've discussed that with them. The solicitor that I'm dealing with, Tony Stella, has been part of the trust right from its original conception. His specialty is maritime marine law, so he's well qualified to lead this process. They also have a planner supporting them. So yes, I think they're well capable of doing this, and they've said that they will lead that process for us.
I'm referring, thanks for that, that was very helpful. Appreciate it. I'm referring particularly to funding, the necessary funding, if we met half of the costs involved. What's your view on that?
Mr. Stillard said that he will provide the legal costs at his, the legal fees at his expense, and he's working on the planner to see if he can get a similar response. I think that they will be able to cover, well, I know that they'll be able to cover their share of the consent.
Oh, that's very pleasing to hear. Thank you.
Through the chair, can I just add something to that response? So it may very well be that Mr. Starlight and the planner may offer their services in terms of not charging, but there will be council costs that any applicant would have to meet.
Okay.
What's your response to that, Officer Petheram?
Yes, that was the basis of my assessment of the $20,000 contribution, and Mr. Starr thought that was quite a generous amount. However, because we didn't know the extent of the involvement of who would be submitting, what the issues would be, we tried to put it on the high side. But yes, we see that our contribution would be towards those council costs.
Thank you. Mr. Petheram, these are, in your judgment, and I do respect your judgment, these are reputable people you're dealing with. Picking up the chair's report, chair's comment, they wouldn't be of a mind to, at any way during this, any time during this process, walk away, would they?
Councillors, these people have done this work for the good of the community, right from its inception, right at the beginning. They may be disappointed that we haven't come up with a decision fast when they wanted, but no, they won't walk away from this this deal. They're there for the benefit of Nelson. They're reputable people.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. So before I put on to Laurie, Bywater and Madam Mayor some questions, we've got a couple of options we could do here. And if I'm reading the mood of the meeting right, we could leave this to lie on the table, and officers provide. So lie on the table, no more discussion, and officers go back and provide the information on a number of things there before us to consider at a future meeting, or we defer the item to another meeting, noting that the trust, the Seafarers Trust, will carry the cost of resource consent renewal, etc., in full, and that the item is deferred for us to consider at a community recreation meeting the following consent renewal, and allow officers to provide additional information maybe in regards to unbundling that naming rights issue, making sure that we've spoken to iwi first before we consider taking on board and seeing what issues come there. Is that the mood of the table, one of those options?
Mr. Chair, I'm foreshadowing that I will move that it lies on the table after you take the questions from Councillor Laurie and Councillor Bywater.
And the lie on the table is as in
Foreshadowing to allow them to have their questions.
Okay, thank you for that. So if we go to that, you're sorry?
Just noting that I would second that motion.
Okay, thank you. So Councillor Laurie and Councillor Bywater, I'll enable your questions. Thank you for foreshadowing.
Thank you, Councillor Skinner. So I just want to go back to some basics, really. The structure has been there for 20 years and the trust has covered its costs up until now, I understand. It appears something has changed. Are staff able to tell us a bit about what has changed in terms of the trust's ability to look after its peer?
Mr. Chair, councillors, they tell me that they are just getting old. They're the same members that they had in 2000 or 99, and they're just getting past it, and they want to hand it on to the council.
Okay, thanks. Next question through the chair. Did we know this was coming? Like, I remember when Tony Stallard presented to the long-term plan and put this idea forward, there was a bit of surprise, and I'm just wondering, was it a surprise for staff? Did you know this was coming?
No, the first we knew of it was when they submitted to the LTP.
Yeah. Okay. That's all I need to know. Thanks.
Bon.
Thank you. The Mayor has foreshadowed already for it to lie. I was actually waiting for us to go into public exclusion because I've been a little bit uncomfortable around some of the questions and how we seem to be diving quite deep into some sorts of respectfully to a trust, not a trust, and et cetera, et cetera. And we seem to be going around the table and on I think it would be possibly our third round of questions from all councillors. So I am sensing that there is a lot to this really that we need to still be looking at. So I was waiting for us to go into public exclusion. And respectfully, I think that's possibly what we need to call for at this time. Thank you.
What I've got foreshadowed, Madam Mayor and Councillor in regards to matter left on lie on the table, and there's some wording that governance have got there that may be matching what you're after, but be completely clear, Madam Mayor. So left lie on the table was that we leave this item today, request that officers provide some more information in regards to what we've been discussing in regards to for a future meeting, or do you want us to indicate, let it lie on the table and indicate to the Seafarers Trust Group that we would be only really wanting to go ahead of this if they took on the cost of resource consent? Did you want to indicate that?
No, I don't, Mr. Chair. I wanted to lie on the table so we sort these things out. So I so move.
Okay. So obviously able to, you can have it moved and seconded. I assume that's, and obviously we still come up for vote. That is there a general? I assume there's a general request around the meeting table at the moment that we do something of this nature. Is that right? Just put the hands up if that's what you're wanting to do. Let it lie on the table. No one's urgent to push us through. Okay, I got 1, 2, 3. I see 3. Was it 4, 5, 6? Okay, yep. So no, very good. So I think that's very wise, Madam Mayor. So you want to move? Do we need the words up on the screen? I've got some words that Robin had. I think match it.
Through the chair, with the permission of the mover and seconder, we've added the items that the meeting has discussed that you might
very good
request to have further information on.
Very good. I'll need to bring it up on the screen. Very good. And naming, was that something? I mean, that seemed like the naming rights is an assumption that they'll continue having naming rights when we own the jetty. Is that something that needs to be teased out? Good. So, Madam Mayor, is that?
Mr. Chair, I prefer that it is something that's framed around including matters, because I think we may find that there will be other things that will need to be resolved.
So the matters above plus others, or including additional information, including.
It's a tricky one to change like that.
Yeah.
See you, Robin, moving around on that.
Which would include, be considered at the future meeting, which would include.
Including but not limited to. Mr. Chair, I had also raised the internal corporate accounting processes that were required, and that was also an important one to enable the continuation of the blessing of the fleet. So I think that needs to, we do want these things to continue. We do want them to be successful, so that needs to go on the list. Thank you.
Yeah. And Andrew, you had Andrew White.
Yes, thank you. I think if we might be able to combine that with the full life cycle costs council will incur and accounting practices or something like that in that one, because it's part of the same conversation.
Okay.
And Mr. Chair, the other thing I'd like for some consideration here is actually getting some, seeing if there's any other funding opportunities for this particular matter, because I do agree with, as I said earlier, that this, in my view, is a national memorial. I think we should just explore alternative funding opportunities.
Alternative or additional.
And I think if the members of the private trust are listening to this today, they will understand very fully that we are very appreciative of all they have done, and we want to make sure that it has, we can carry that forward into the future.
Yeah, definitely. I think we're going to make sure it's very clear that we're not taking this all for granted. With our prudence here, we are very appreciative of it. We want to make sure that we're not making it more difficult for them to do the good work they're doing, or make it difficult for us to provide for the public what we're trying to achieve, they're trying to achieve, and what they've already achieved, and reflecting on that. Okay, so I'm comfortable what we've got in there. That fulfills, Madam Mayor and Councillor Edgar, what you had in mind. Yes, and also I'll put it out to the rest of the committee here. Obviously, I want to make sure this is we're on the same page here. I assume what the rest of the committee had in mind. This is what you had in mind for lying on the table moving forward from this. Any concerns you want to raise about what we've got in front of us, rather than going into debate? Councillor Noonan. Can't hear.
There is
can't hear you, Gar.
There is no debate, Mr. Chair, on
No.
Okay.
Only question on the on what we've got in front of us is, should we be setting a timeline on that?
So I'd say no. I'm comfortable without a timeline on that. So governance, and Andrew, so what we do here, we've got this on the table here. Do we just need to put that?
That's correct.
To vote on that?
Through the chair, you need to put that.
Okay. Okay, I generally get a fairly agreement around the table there. There's nothing else to add or take away from that. I'll put it, those in favour of what we've got in front of us. Aye, with using your reactions button, tick. Across the room. Those in favour, I see it's unanimous unless I miss someone. Those against, put a cross up there. That is carried. Thank you. Very good. Well done. Thank you for your patience, everyone, on that. And once again, like Madam Mayor said, we're very appreciative of the great work that organisation have done, and appreciative of what they're offering further to the community. And we want to make sure we do that right for the community and do it right for the trust and the people, both iwi and community as a whole. Thank you. Very good. So I'll move on. Just check if we need a break. So that is no, it's not the last item. Next, we've got the Community Recreation Quarterly Report. So I'll just give a moment for governance and staff. Is everyone all right there with or without a break? So have a break after that, or would you need a break after this?
I'm going to give a break now.
Okay. Okay. 5 or 10?
10.
10-minute break. So we'll come back at 11:40 and then we'll go into quarterly report, and we've got a presentation of a review from the managers for the year gone by. Thank you. Hi everyone. We're just coming out of a break. Let's see what we've got for numbers. Well, thank you. And I think we've got numbers here, Jasmine and Robin.
Yes, we've got quorum.
Very good. So thank you. I'll begin. So reminding public and council to just come out of just a 2-minute break there between items, give ourselves a bit of a fresh air and a refreshment, and we're back into it. So we're back on straight on schedule, 11:45, which is a community and recreation quarterly report, and this is obviously up to June. Keep a note, this is up to June this year, so obviously doesn't account for July, August, September. But we've got Rosie, Mark, and Serena, and we've got starting this with a year in review presentation from the managers. So I'll hand that over to the team. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So it's always good at this adjunct in a year when we are reporting on our final quarter to actually talk about the things that have happened during the year that have really made a difference in our community. Sometimes I think we get caught up in the detail of where we are in the in the business of where we are, that we forget about just what has happened. So at the end of June last year, I'd been in this role for 5 months, and that's about the time where you start to feel that your reflections are starting to make some sense. So I'll just do a short introduction at the beginning, and then I'll hand over to the managers, who actually deserve all the credit for the huge mahi they have done during the year. But just as some reflections as a person coming back to Nelson after some time away after their childhood, it's always good to reflect when you've moved around a lot on how the place where you are compares to others. And I think sometimes in Nelson we probably take a little bit for granted for what we've got here. It's an incredible place environmentally, culturally, socially, and although it doesn't tend to be in my portfolio as a key item, the influence of community services on the economy is significant as well. So I always do think it is good just to look sometimes at how good we've got it. And I know I said when I first came into the role that I'm quite astounded, quite amazed by how much investment this council commits to its community through the assets that it provides in the community services space, and through the services and support that it provides through the community. And it is significant compared to other local authorities, regional authorities that I've worked within, and I think it's something that this community and this council should be very proud of, because it makes a huge difference to the lives of everybody. And sometimes we may not see it because we're so used to it. So I would like to say that the team of staff I have been extremely impressed with, and I feel very privileged to have worked with our staff for the last 7 months. We have some very good managers working in the community services space, and they'll be talking to you soon. They're hugely committed, they're hugely capable, and hugely experienced in what they do. And as I said, I feel very privileged to be able to lead people of such caliber. I would also like to say for the elected members, the leadership and the support that you've shown us through the time I've been here has been awesome, and specifically to you, Tim as the chair, and Trudy and Yvonne as the deputy chairs. I've really enjoyed our working relationship, and I think your passion for your community and you getting into the deep discussions in the community. And I think about that first meeting we had with the Natureland people. That was a real eye-opener for me around just how engaged the three of you do get with your community, and I think it's really well recognised. There are so many different organisations that we work with, whether they are our council-controlled organisations, such as the museum, the SUTA, organisations such as NCMA, who we have a really great relationship with, organisations such as Friends of Wakapuaka Cemetery, who we've got a really strong relationship with and who make a huge difference in our community. The list goes on and on. The sports organisation, the cultural organisations who we work with to provide for our community. We do it together, and I think we do it really well. I'd like to talk about initiatives that Council has around the Community Investment Fund, for example, which have a huge impact on people in our community who really need it. Councillor Noonan or Gail Noonan, in the role that she had earlier today, talking about the Rotary led partnership around Te Whare Haumaru, that is an awesome example of how we can partner together. And then finally, it's not just Council on its own who provides the services. The services that NELMAC and CLM provide on our behalf and with us are critical to how well the community services are provided in this in Nelson. So I'll hand over to the managers now, but I do think it is really important for all of us elected members and staff and partners to really reflect on the contribution that Council does make in the community with others. I'll hand over to you, Rosie.
Thank you, Andrew.
Kia ora koutou. Thank you very much. And through the chair, just as a brief introduction. Next slide, please, Robin. As an introduction, the Parks and Facilities team are just an incredibly hard-working thanks, Robin. Incredibly hard-working, really passionate group of people. And that was very, very evident over COVID. There was an awful lot of operational issues that needed to be dealt with, along with just business as usual, trying to keep the business unit ticking. But I'd have to say one thing that we're not particularly good at is promoting ourselves. And often the work that we do goes quite unnoticed. So going through this process of preparing this PowerPoint, it was a really useful exercise for the whole team, just to run through all the achievements and all of the work that has happened. We're often really looking to see what we're doing, working on the ground, making sure we're working with all those community and sporting groups, rather than just taking a bit of time to reflect on what has happened. So I've just got a few slides here today, and I just wanted to run through some of those achievements that have happened as of the past year. So there's, in terms of repairs and maintenance, there's a huge range of work that goes on here, which comes under our renewals and our minor capital budgets. And this is anything from furniture, which could be seating or rubbish bins or picnic tables, through to fencing, through to tracks and signage, and car park reseals. So there's an awful lot of that sort of work going on within our parks and reserves. But I think one of the most sort of challenging and interesting repair jobs that we've had is the Pikimai Church Hill steps. This was damaged by vandalism, a vehicle being driven down the steps. It took an awful lot of work from Hayley Spence, our contract supervisor for our Premier Parks, to work with a qualified historical stone mason to do the repair works. Unfortunately, it's a really specialised skill, so we had to wait our line in the turn throughout New Zealand to actually get these works done. And then obviously the earlier lockdown as well delayed it. but it is all now complete, but a very interesting piece of work that we needed to work through. Next slide, please. And structure renewals is another one of the budgets that we work under as well. And this was a very interesting job working at Naatsu, just to replace the zigzag. You can see the slide on your left was the previous one, and the one on the right is the repair job, along with the entrance upgrade. But other work that we've also done under this budget has included the Queen's Garden footbridge, the Jenkins Creek shared path bridge, which is part of the Great Taste Trail. So I know there's certainly a few stories about people coming up on this bridge previously, but it's a lot wider and a lot safer for people to bike over now. The Marsden Valley footbridge, bridges at the golf course, painting all of our bridges, also repairs to the Hawlashore Jetty, and the Basin Reserve staircase were all redone under the structural renewals. Next slide. Thanks. And our upgrade projects, these are 3 projects that are most recent, but I also wanted to go over the new projects that have been completed this year, which is the Quarter Park Playground and Pump Track, the mountain bike tracks. We've got the Kawatu Whetu, the 692 climb, the Butters, the Waimaru, the Copper Mine upgrade, and along with this, we also completed the Kawatu Recreational Agreement. Just for all those keen mountain bikers out there, there's been a lot of work going into those track upgrades. Also the Eureka Park walkway, highly recommend everyone going to have a look at this. It's a really, really special, unique area within the Brook Reserve. Also the Modeller's Pond design's been completed. The Marsden Valley Dog Park. The Marsden Valley Dog Park's been one of our highest compliments area. We've had so much positive feedback from the community around the dog park, so that's been a really fun project to be involved with. The Champion Road connection that you see in the slide there out at Saxon Fields, the Miller Arcade toilets and the Tahuna toilets. So projects that are underway but not yet completed in the last financial year. We're all aware of the Modeller's Pond, the Pullman's Walkway and the Stoke Youth Park are still underway. Next slide, please. Our mountain bikes, so we're regularly reporting on our mountain bikes and our tracks and upgrades. An interesting project that we undertook last year was regrading all the tracks. Nelson has always been really well known as having very tough grades and tough tracks, which has helped with sort of its reputation, but it doesn't help tourists or new people coming to ride those tracks. So along with Tasman District Council, we undertook a track regrading, and with the Mountain Bike Club to make sure what we're advertising of the grades is clear and accurate. So that was just rolled out a couple of weeks ago. Next slide, please. So this is Waleoro from our capital projects team. I love this slide because we do work so closely with the capital projects team. Wale's an absolutely fantastic project manager. So a lot of the work that we do, our asset planners, so primarily Jane, Carol and Paul, will start off with a business case and they'll do a strategic business case and then an indicative business case that will come out of our activity management plans. And once we're at that stage, then we start to talk to our capital projects team. So we feel really fortunate that we get to work with them on the same floor and have good conversations and get to know them on a personal level. And then they help deliver these projects for us. And then the project goes over to our operational team who continue to work, in this case, with the Riverside pool heating. And just next slide, thank you. The last slide for our team is community plantings. So community plantings is a really, really fun part of the job, but quite a lot of planning and organisation and promotion with our comms team and media releases go into the making of these happening. Just got some really interesting stats here that you'll see in the quarterly report as well. So 14,000 plants were planted in the urban esplanade, and this included 33 fruit trees. Within walkways, there was 570 plants,
Street gardens, there was 1,700 plants, and neighbourhood parks was 700, which included 70 fruit trees. Along with this, our Adopt a Spot program planted over 2,000 trees. So in total, that's almost 20,000 plantings. So an awful lot of plantings does go in around our reserves, and I think a great way to celebrate this is through our community planting days. It gets really visual. It also allows the community to have that sense of ownership over both the park and the trees that they've planted. So that's just a wee snapshot of what happened last year for parks and facilities. And I'll pass you over to Mark. Thank you.
Thank you. And thanks for the opportunity to share a few snippets of the year from community partnerships. What I'm going to share is not a summary of everything, it's just some of the highlights that the team's been working on. And like Andrew and Rosie, I'd really like to acknowledge the quality of the team and the amazing work that's been going on. I think as a theme for the last 12 months, it's really been around building partnerships. Right across the team in the events sector, the community development, and the arts and heritage. What the team has been focusing on is listening to our community, working alongside our community, and then partnering to make a really effective difference. And we're really proud of that. And yeah, it's really, I believe it's really contributing to Nelson, as Andrew was saying, being an amazing place to return to and to live in. So, some of the specifics from a few snippets from community partnerships. You'll see on the slide there, some of you may recognise that event. It was the Mayor's Task Force for Jobs. Training graduation, where we had 200 graduates, which is incredible. And it's an opportunity for them to come along and attend the graduation, which they otherwise wouldn't have the opportunity to do. For the first time this year, this partnered with MSD, who promoted their Mana and Mahi graduates, and we're very proud of our cadets who are in the picture there, April and Amo, who were also successful graduates of that program. As well as community development out there, our council invests strongly in young people, and we have a great track record of training and supporting young people into our council staff roles. And of course, we benefit having them on the community partnerships team. Next slide. Okay, now you've already heard from Rotary today about and Andrew about the Te Whare Haumaru project. Yeah, this is so cool. This is such a good example, as was shared by John and Gail, in terms of the community, council, business, working together to achieve a fabulous outcome, which is this new facility down at the mailroom. It is a great facility. It's really important to look after. It's a really important asset to look after the physical and social needs of people who are doing it tough and living without adequate shelter, and at the same time, most importantly, making sure they're connected with the other services they need. And that's health services through to finding sustainable and appropriate accommodation. This has been a real poster child of partnership and between council, a fantastic NGO, the mailroom, and the community. And it is impossible to talk about the project without acknowledging the huge and central effort of the combined Rotaries of Nelson. So we really appreciate that and regard this as a huge success. At this point in time, I'll pass over to Serena.
Kia ora, thanks Mark, and thank you Rosie. I'd just like to say, I think it's a cross-community services network where our staff are just passionate about what they do. And it's come across in Rosie's presentation and Mark's presentation, and it certainly applies to libraries as well. We have some passionate team members. So the first slide here is our new quarterly newsletter, Kōrero Hapori. We're just developing our third newsletter. What we've worked out is that the library does a huge range of things, and often it's identified as the place of collections, perhaps a bit of programming, without really that wider understanding of what a library today can encapsulate. And we've got our website, which helps, but obviously it's in a digital format. So we wanted to create something physical that we could hand customers, people new to the library, that sort of demonstrate that wider understanding of what libraries today can offer. So feedback so far is that that's been really successful. Next slide, thanks Robin. So community and events and displays, it was hard to pick out photos. We've got thousands of photos of everything that goes on. And it's something different each week. And essentially this is just a snapshot of a number of different events and a number of different displays. So we've got the outreach at the bottom with the Multicultural Festival. We've got some music happening. We've got Nalini Singh. And I'd like to apologise. We've made a typo there on this slide. It's Chris Stewart, not Christ Stewart. So I apologise for that. But a wonderful author talk event there. And the photo, I don't know whether it's your right or left on the screen, in regards to the Employment Expo, which was held in November last year as a response to COVID. And that was a really successful event. It was followed up in May with a training, professional development skills expo. And we've been working with Connected, which is part of MSD, on that. And that is a relationship that we hope to build and bring more events like this to the community. Next slide, thanks, Robin. So sewing and knitting, I wanted to sort of, it's quite niche, but it's something which has been incredibly successful. So we purchased 2 sewing machines, and it was just prior to the start of this past financial year. And they were just getting so well used that the Friends of the Library purchased 6 more for the library. We now have 8 sewing machines, and we started with just drop-in sessions and children's classes. And the feedback that we've had, especially from parents whose children have gone to these classes, has just been so wonderful and so positive and so heartwarming. And we know that something as simple as children having something new to do, something which perhaps their friends don't do, it can create a lot of self-worth in individuals. So we've started extending the classes into adult classes as well. So, yep, next slide, please. So children's programs. So it's a long day since the library just had, 1 or 2 children's story times each week. Our children's programs and events is an absolutely vital, integral part of what we do, and there's something happening every single day. We do a lot of outreach. We support a lot of schools, a lot of early childhood centres, and I would say we actually just have to be careful now. There's a lot of demand still in this space, and it's just trying to balance the needs of what we can resource and deliver versus what is needed. But I think we've got a pretty happy balance at the moment. Next slide, thanks. So the Summer Reading Challenge, we might recognise a few elected members in this photo. So this is an annual reading challenge which is run over the summer period. Last year we had close to 400 participants. And it's basically just to encourage those literacy skills in a fun way over the summer period while school is out. And yeah, it's just wonderful. I hope you would agree, Mr. Chair. Right. Next slide, thanks, Robin. Right, so I just wanted to highlight this. This is something we've consciously worked quite hard at over the past year, is allocating some of our funding towards new STEM-related products. So, and I have mentioned this in the quarterly report, so there's been some new programming, STEM drop-ins, purchase of virtual reality headsets, etc. And we've seen an incredible use and uptake of this. And what we are now doing, or we started just prior to lockdown, is moving this STEM towards adults. So it's not just for children, it's for everyone to have a go at new technologies. Yeah, thanks. Next one. Oh, I've got a lot of slides. Right, seed library. So this is actually something which is, again, I wanted to highlight this as a real success story for the past year. This is something that the library, we provide space and we help facilitate, but it really is run by some incredible volunteers from the Nelson Seed Library who deliver numerous amount of workshops, who actually manage the physical collection of seeds. And what we are seeing is that it's just going from strength to strength. The Seed Library is, they're getting more and more attendees at workshops. It's just fantastic to see, and it's a really, really great community resource. Thanks, Robin. So the Curio exhibition software. So this is a piece of software which the library has purchased a subscription for, and and we've also purchased the hardware. So these are interactive touch screens. And it's just a different way of sharing our community stories, promoting what is happening within the library, but also within the community. Prior to this COVID, they were just getting more and more use. You can see there, you can record the number of touches on the screens, and it's really quite exciting. And obviously these interactive touch screens can be used for more than just the software. Over the Olympics, we showed a number of the finals, and it was just a really cool atmosphere. So we hope to do things like that more with this technology. Thanks, Robin. So this is my final slide, and I am just so proud of this. So last year we issued a total of 717,000 items. Now it says physical and digital. So out of that, the digital was 80,000 items. And that is up about half. A few years ago it was 33,000 and now it's 81,000, which I just think is absolutely incredible. And that works out to about 2,000 physical items a day, which are issued, which, yeah, I'm just really proud of. And that's actually an increase from our previous non-COVID year. Yeah, so that's the library. I'd just like to thank the elected members for their support. It has been a challenging year for libraries. So thank you.
Okay, now coming back to me just to talk briefly about arts, heritage and events. Some snippets from our year in those spaces. The welcome cloak, great, you'll see the photo there, it's got a fantastic new home in Putangatangi Green Meadows, and it was gifted the name Te Karawai Aroha by iwi, and that was unveiled at a ceremony in April. Hopefully you've all biked the railway reserve and enjoyed the two murals that are on the underbridge that you can see there. The one pictured is Kia Haumaru Te Haere by Neris Ngā Ruhi, and on the opposite side is Enjoy the Ride by Hannah Starnes. There's also one thing we really have to mention is the fantastic work around the CBD and the collaboration between Makeshift Council and the Suitor. You will have hopefully noticed the 28 large format images of pictures that are held in the Suitor collection, and you click on your phone. We're all familiar, with doing that now. And it takes you through and tells you some stories in the background of those artworks. And that's really, there's got a lot of support across the community and business for that. Some other arts projects this year have included the Rivers of the Region, which is the reusing the Darryl Frost artwork that was previously at the airport, at the marina, painting chorus cabinets, use of the council's light art projector with both council and community organisations. And next slide. In the heritage space, Tuku 21, the Heritage Month, that's just grown from strength to strength every year. This year, the number of events featuring non-European stories and experience has risen from 2% in 2018 to over a quarter, 25% this year. So that's fantastic. There's a new Rutherford Cottage display at Founders Park. Do go and have a look at that if you haven't seen it already. Also at Founders, the windmill has been refurbished with repairing rotten weatherboards and windows and a good paint and a few less leaks. The June Book Fair raised $141,000 and that's on top of the $160K raised in October, which occurred late due to the lockdown last year. So huge support from the community and our volunteers at Founders in terms of that fundraising. And at Broad Green, the second stage of the cob repair work has been finished. This included the north face facade above the veranda roof and the west gables. Most of the repair work has now been done with just a small amount left to be done this year. Next slide. And finally, in the event space, and again, just a few snippets here, talking about some of the youth events. So Rock the City occurred recently. It was held at MIT with 12 acts, representing 35 young people on stage and also another 12 in production roles, attended by 175. Laugh Nelson, it was at the Suter with 147 young people, with stand-up comedians Brendan Green and Fraser Hooper, alongside performances from the colleges, Nayland Girls College and Garran, as well as theatre sports. Young and Inspired at the Suter, well attended by 110. Laugh Nelson and the Young and Inspired were part of Nelson's National Youth Week and supported by and coordinated by Whanake Youth. And all of those events received really positive community support and feedback. And I think that's the last slide. Thank you.
Cool. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. A lot of effort put into that, and it's easy for us to forget how much work has been done by council. And yeah, big hand to the staff who just worked tirelessly away with their increased knowledge of the town and the city with the input of the governance. But no, I'm always very impressed with the amount of work that just gets done, and the best work that gets done is the work just getting on with it. But thank you, and thank you, Andrew.
Thanks, Tim. So I see you've got a couple of questions there. Happy to take the quarterly report as read, if assuming that you've all read it. I think quite a few of you have, with some of the comments that have come through to us, and happy to take questions on that.
Cool. Cheers. So I'll go from the top of my screen, which is Councillor Laurie, Councillor Edgar, and Councillor Noonan.
Thank you, Councillor Skinner, and thank you very much, staff, for that fabulous report and great presentation. A question for Serena, if it's okay. Wonderful to see the fantastic crowd pulling events that are happening at the library. I'm just curious, if we built you an amazing new library, how much more of that sort of stuff could we have in Nelson Whakatū?
Heaps. Sorry, through the chair, heaps.
Excellent. Anything else? Any other thoughts?
I mean, I think the need is there. We could deliver and deliver and deliver, and people would come. There is an absolute need. We can't, and I mentioned that in the children's section, I believe, especially. You know, parents are crying out for low cost, free, not so much entertainment, but fun and for their children, for their tamariki. Absolutely, there's a need. Yeah.
Great. Thank you very much. Next question to the chair. 8.9 of the report, the Mai Tai Recreation Hub. I understand from memory that was due to start construction in spring. We're in spring. Just wondering if we could hear a bit about how that's going. Please.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, I can respond to that. It's going well. The resource consent was lodged last week, and we're looking on track to start construction mid-November.
Mid-November, great. Thank you. And just last comment, if it's okay, Mr. Chair, I just want to say that that trail, Kuata Whetu Kuata, is just absolutely glorious. It makes many, many people very, very happy. Thank you very much for the work on that. That's me.
Thank you. Yeah, I'd just like to also start with thanking the staff for all their mahi. You know, we saw that, you know, we've got a section called Community Partnerships, but I think what we really heard is that actually nothing happens without the strength of the community and the community working with us, whether it's mountain bike tracks or the plantings or library events or Heritage Festival. Actually, it's our community that we're working with and delivering. So it's great that as a council, as a community, we're all working together for these great outcomes for Nelson. Couple of questions. So firstly, page 125, the combined project with TDC on Balk Creek. I didn't know Balk Creek came into Nelson city boundaries. Can someone clarify where that project is?
Through the chair, yes, it actually is within the TDC regional area, and it was a joint grant between NCC and TDC that was used as a government funding after the last COVID lockdown.
Sorry, why are we doing a project inside TDC boundaries then? I don't quite understand.
So through the chair, it was a project through infrastructure, but because of the how the funding worked out, it was a joint funding with the TDC, but done on TDC land to secure the government funding, the project ready funding.
Okay, I'll stay slightly confused, but that's okay. Thank you. The refinery, page 135. So it says, page 135, that earthquake strengthening is on track. But then if I look to the project sheet on page 176, it sort of says it's on budget and on time, but the very bottom left comment in very small writing that sort of cuts off half a sentence mentions additional budget requirement of about 496,000 for construction. So can someone clarify the on track versus 496,000 additional requirement? And so what's happening with that project, please?
I'll respond to that. So the senior leadership team is expecting a memo from the property team next week, hopefully. We were expecting it last month, but I think we're going to get it next week, as I understand, which will give us some more clarity around any future challenges we have with that project around cost and options. We haven't seen that memo, we haven't seen that business case at this point, but certainly the property team will be coming back to council once the senior leadership team has reviewed that.
So is the 500,000 an exact or an estimate? You know, so sorry, there is a figure in here that 496 is quite exact. So we're not on time, and it does look like we definitely need quite a lot more money. And so a business case is being done around that, and that's coming back to the next committee meeting, maybe? Is that what I'm trying to, is that what I get from that?
May I to enlighten you a little bit on that, please? Yes, the end budget was a lot higher than the original presumptive costs, and those costs that you've mentioned are the exact costs that are now needed in addition to the original presumptive costs. This was presented previously, SLT, and since then I've done a lot of work to assure those that will be looking at this this memo again that there is an abundance of interest in occupancy for the building. And so, there's been so I'll be able to present that. The memo is currently being reviewed by Nikki Harrison, so it should be with you very, very soon. So a lot of time has gone recently since the last memo into exploring the actual interest. So if we are going to actually invest this money, how will the building be used? And so the interest has been quite phenomenal, really. For example, there's been interest for example, from Scott's Construction to redevelop the site. There's been interest in community arts to occupy the building, and also from iwi to occupy the building as well, local iwi. So there is interest that you will be keen to know that will support the requirement for the extra funding.
Okay, so, and that would be unbudgeted expenditure, nothing. So were you aware prior to us signing off the LTP that the costs were going to be higher than the presumptive costs?
No, the final costing was only done afterwards. Previously this was presumptive costs, but once the design was complete, that was the end cost and the end requirement for further funding.
Okay, thank you. I'm not quite sure what redevelopment means, but I hope to see community using that space. Next question is on page 146, and it's a Modeller's Pond replacement park, and then it relates also to page 168 in the sheets. Can someone just clarify the process of when that's coming back? And this is probably an apology on my memory for this one. I know that at the very least myself, but I do recall some other councillors asking if there could be some water features as part of this park. Just wondering when designs are coming back for council approval, and if water features are still being looked at to be incorporated.
Mr. Chair, councillors, the resolution was for us to proceed to detailed design and begin construction. So we are well on the way now. We're moving into that detailed design space. But perhaps regarding water features, what aspect were you referring to, councillor?
Yeah, so it was raised by, I think at the very least myself and Councillor Courtney, having some sort of splash and play spaces within it. And I think I recall a submission as well about that.
Councillors, Mr. Chair, I think you recall when we put the last report through to council, we had to explain sadly that we just don't have the funds to do water plays such as that. It was just well beyond our budget, and that we would have to look at an alternative site for such play. But it's not included as part of this project.
Is it able to be future-proofed for it, or are you actively looking at other areas?
I think the best solution would be to look at other areas, and it's possibly something that we can address as part of the upgrade or the future of our pools project.
Thank you. Page 152, and it also relates to page 156. So page 152, the council circle bus shelter, says work is underway. On page 156, it says that it's being done. and I'm sure I went past it a week or so ago, and it was still totally, wrapped up and nothing looked like it had happened. Can someone clarify whether it's been done, or hasn't started?
Thank you. Yes, through the chair, that page 156 said it had been strengthened, which was the intent that it would be finished by now when we wrote this report, but it's still now within the end of this week or next week, it should be finished on site.
Lovely, thank you. And my final question is, there was commentary at the bottom of a few of the project summary sheets about capitalising staff costs, which 100% agree with. That's normal practice. Probably surprised it hasn't already been happening. Just wondering then if that has the potential for OPEX savings once staffing costs are able to be capitalised to projects.
I wonder if Ms. French could comment on that for us.
Thanks, Rosie. Through the chair, it would be OPEX savings in the sense of that if we had already coded the costs to an operational code and then transferred it through to capital, then yes, that would be the case. I'm not 100% sure on which project sheets state that we would be looking at that, but we can look into it further and come back to you.
That would be lovely. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Noonan and Councillor Courtney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, I'm just going to go back to the item on the refinery because I'd have to say I'm quite surprised at the response that we've been given by the officer. It sounds like there's some commercial interest in that building, and I haven't been made aware of that. We've made some commitments to community groups for that. I just want a bit more of information on that, please.
Through the chair, I'm really sorry, but Ms. Pace has just left the room after that item. Can we come back to you on that one, please?
Okay.
That'd be fine.
The other comment I need to make is that when we get to the sheets at the back, some of those don't belong to this committee. So when we're receiving the report, we need a note of the ones that don't belong here, potentially. They need to go to where they need to go to.
Through the chair, sorry, I should have mentioned one of them, which is the Upper Trafalgar Street item, which certainly doesn't come to this committee, so shouldn't be discussed at this committee. The other one, which I think Councillor Noonan is referring to, is probably the library project sheet, and I've given my rationale for that one being included to the end of this year, which is that it has been reported in every quarterly report to community and recreation this year, but it is very clear that decision-making delegation for the library project sits with council.
Thank you. And the other one I think was I thought sat with the Saxton Field Committee, which is the Champion Drive connection. Does that belong here or does that go to that one? Page 172.
It should go to that one.
It should go to Saxton Field?
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, I think that was all. Thank you. We'll come back to that other one.
Councillor Courtney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just want to say, you'll probably say it too, but I'm going to say it as well. What a fantastic, absolutely fantastic report. It just shows how, as a council, we are just getting so much closer day by day to the community. And I want to say thank you to Officer White too for just remembering one or two people in his introduction, because it told me a lot about that officer as well. Mr. Chair, I want to go back to Serena. Oh my goodness gracious me. I don't know where to start. I don't know where all her ideas are coming from. Where is she? I can't even see her. She's gone home, I suppose. Or she's gone back to work, I would think. But I want to know, because Serena, where did the idea come from these sewing classes? I see so much opportunity there for all different people and children, and she does children. I want to know what's free. I want to know these $70 a week, not $70 a week, 10-week course fees, and perhaps is there some way that the community could contribute, drop those fees for people that may be struggling to meet those fees? Tell us more, please, about this wonderful idea of these sewing classes.
Thank you, Councillor Courtney, through the chair. I honestly cannot remember who actually had the idea. We have the libraries around New Zealand and around the world talk to each other, and we learn from each other. And I believe that we would have seen it at another library and thought, hey, that's cool, let's try that. And as with most things, we like to sort of just test the waters first, which was why there was just the purchase of the 2 sewing machines. Straight away, they were a hit, especially with the classes. The drop-in sessions did take a little bit longer to garner support. But what we are seeing through the use of the sewing machines is just really wonderful community stories. We had a woman who made a graduation cloak out of feathers for her daughter. We have a artist who started coming in, repairing clothes, etc. And people would comment and talk to her. And since that, she is starting regular drop-in sessions using our machines to create a fabric community-led art piece. So there's stories like that which are coming through. The adult classes, which were unfortunately disrupted with this latest COVID round, are just wonderful. Robin Reynolds has been an amazing teacher. We've been very lucky to secure her services. And, perhaps we can look at that suggestion you've made, Councillor Courtney, in regards to that $70. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Thank you, Serena. I just sort of, and I know everyone around the council table will feel the same. We don't want it to be a barrier to those that may have skills that they just cannot come forward and display them because of the cost involved. And what about free for children, that type of thing? Just could you elaborate a little bit more on that, please? The free drop-ins, and you mentioned children and schools, I thought.
Yes, so we've been using, through the chair, we've been using the sewing machines for weekly children's classes for about 3 to 4 terms now. And we, as a council, have been supplying the materials for that. They make a tote bag, a pencil case, things like that. So that's purely, I'm pretty sure that's free, or it's a very small charge if there is a charge. The drop-in sessions, so anyone in the community is welcome to come in and book a session with a sewing machine. We provide a 15-minute introduction. We supply the thread, etc., and they bring in the materials that they require. And what we were seeing is regular people returning week after week, which is exciting to see. That network is growing, and it's growing through word of mouth, which is wonderful.
Great, thank you so much. There's a message, there's something in there for us all to learn, isn't there? That you're bringing people together, it's a community activity. There's a lesson, there's something there for us as community leaders to take away from this. There really is. Yeah, I can see why you're excited. The Deputy Mayor and I are also excited about the possibility one day, we have a dream one day, Mr. Petheram, that we might have a splash pad down at the new family park at Te Hunanui Beach Reserve. I know the Deputy Mayor is very determined, as I am, to see that for a lower a demographic of about a 3-year-old up. 3-year-old or up. So please, can I respectfully ask that perhaps it goes down somewhere on the list and that someone in the community might be able to fund that. It could be called something. Even the park could be given a name. But don't please take away from Judine, Deputy Mayor Edgar and myself, the dream that we have for a splash pad at the family park at Tahuna Beach Reserve, because I think, and she thinks, it'd be fantastic. Could you put it on your list, even if it's at the bottom?
Thank you, Councillor. I think we'll bring some suggestions back to you. Extremely expensive, involves a lot of concrete, but we'll bring some ideas back to you. Thank you.
Kapiti have one, by the way. I just dropped that in there. They're all around the country, but I just would mention Kapiti just as a sort of a incentive to perhaps think a little bit more about it. Thank you.
Yes, a chap from Kapiti is quite keen on it as well, but we'll bring some ideas back to you.
Sorry, I'll go to Councillor Breen.
Thank you, through the chair. I actually just want to say a big thank you to Andrew White and all his team. And I think Rosie covered it off quite well when she said deliver, deliver, deliver. They have so much happening, and looking at ways to create inclusivity for all of the members of the community, regardless of where they identify or how they are. And the knowledge and the experience and the patience that the staff have to also explain some of the technical sides to people like myself, who had a very limited idea of what Community and Recreation Committee deliver, has really, expanded my mind and my thought. And this report really did highlight to me that not only does this team look after active activities, it also looks after the passive recreation, and they actually do it really well. And the ability that they had to respond and stay fluid during the COVID-19 lockdowns to meet community expectations for what they wanted to have available to them, to create the social and the community connections, was really being highlighted. And I feel that sometimes this area within council gets forgotten, that it actually is an area where it creates the well-being and a sense of belonging for our community. So I know a lot of focus from different members of our community get focused on the pipes under the ground, but the social connection and the well-being that this committee and the team deliver, and the vast amount of knowledge, experience and skills and patience to work with and juggle the conflicting at times community expectations about what they want. I just think, hats off, well done.
I concur. Thank you for that. That's been a good round report. So I think that's all for the quarterly report. All questions there. Thank you, team, for that. I've got Councillor Noonan.
I'm coming back. I think your property person is there.
That's right.
So just going back to the refinery.
I'll just get Andrew White.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, I said it in my response to Councillor Noonan, and I said it at the start of this meeting. The discussion about the refinery is going to come through senior leadership team. I think that's the appropriate course for this to take, that it comes through senior leadership team who will give staff direction on how to approach it with council. I don't think now's the time to have that discussion.
Thank you.
I haven't finished.
Well, Councillor Noonan, you wanted to have a question?
Yes, I'd like to indicate that I get the feeling that this is going in a direction that's far more than earthquake strengthening, and I would like a lot more information, because from what I've heard from the officer that spoke before, it sounds like it's going in a direction that hasn't been given governance direction, and I think it should come to the governance table before it goes to SLT, unless it's just on a budget for the earthquake strengthening. So I'm just going to make that as a statement. I'll leave it there.
Thank you. Madam Mayor.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. What an exceptional report. Well done. So much work's been achieved and so much positivity for the community. So a real credit to everyone who's participated in bringing that report forward. I do just want to, I'm sorry I'm having to jump in and out of this meeting today because I'm trying to juggle some other council urgent matters. I do just have, I do just think when it comes to matters of land and divestment, that given the way the organisation is really under pressure, but also our desire for achieving our city centre, you know, our focus on city centre and housing and all of those matters, it is quite important to make sure that if we have embarked on a project which is around, in this case, the one that Councillor Noon is talking about, earthquake strengthening, that if in the course of that we're approached about other matters that might be development opportunities or divesting, that does get fed up to a governance level, just for some form. I have to say, as Mayor, it feels a very unusual thing for me to find that out in the middle of a community and recreation meeting when I have been asking questions about the subject of officers recently. So I just would really encourage that, that there is some sort of, I know opportunities do come along, but I do think that's the sort of thing that does need to be, you know, perhaps included in a councillor newsletter or something like that, so elected members are aware if we're starting to do work in an area for which we haven't got actually in our long-term plans. So it's quite a different process. I'm not averse to that. It's complex land down there, I'd have to say, but just think we could probably just make sure, particularly on land matters when they're focused on our potential priority areas, that we do just try and cover that off in future. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Rachel. Thank you for that. Gail, I think sorry.
Oh, sorry, Mr. Chair. It was just one final matter, just in relation to, and look, I realise it's taking some time to get the delegations in the right spots for meetings, but would really appreciate it if we could get the library redevelopment into the right spot. I have been asking for quite a few cycles now, and I just note it's quite a bit more than the decision making. In fact, the delegation to councillors, it has all responsibilities, powers, functions and duties for the Elmer Turner Library Development and Riverside Precinct. So it just sits quite completely there. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And I say in regards to refining, I don't think it's a discussion point out. I think it's just noted that the earthquake strengthening is underway, is on track. Just letting us know that there has been some inquiries, but obviously that will come through the process. I know no more than that, apart from my reading there. But thank you for the very fulsome quarterly report. Councillor Noon, I think you were saying something there.
Sorry, Mr. Chair. Look, I don't believe it is on track because my understanding was it was supposed to be completed at the end of this year, which, I mean, we haven't got many weeks left and nothing's started. So how can it be on track?
I can't answer that question. Andrew?
I'm sorry, I can't answer that question either. It's a project that's being delivered by property and the projects team, but we will be able to answer that question soon, I would think.
Okay, very good. Thank you. That wraps it up. So we've got the quarterly report here. As you know, we've got the recommendation and receiving the report and a recommendation to council, as you'll see on page 122. Do we need to bring it up on screen just for transparency and clarity for those viewing?
I'm happy to move, Tim.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Brand. Can I have someone second it?
Mr. Chair, I was just going to suggest you put the minor amendments clause in to cover off those pages that you're going to remove that don't belong to the committee's delegation. So if you just want to add that, then if you mover and second are happy with that, then I'm happy with that.
Yeah, I don't know if we need. I'll ask staff here. Do we need a minor clause on that, or is it just pretty much part of what's noted in the discussion in the minutes?
Through the chair, you're only receiving the report.
Yep. No, very good. Yes, so sorry, I've had it.
So, Mr. Chair, sorry, how's that covered off then? How do we recognise that those pages have gone, have been removed? How's that recorded?
Well, I think coming back to what our staff, Andrew's answered the question why some of those are there for completeness, and acknowledge that those would go to the committees that they're under, but there is no decision making on that. And I understand Madam Mayor was saying that all discussion on that needs to be on those committees, but that was part of a report. But I mean, if you want to add something to that to say that they were now going to be also put into another report, they will come to their right committee.
I would have
not trying to make more work.
That it's noted in the minutes that some of the pages that are not under the delegation were removed just in the minutes.
Okay, so we'll make a note. We'll make a note in the minutes here. If staff are able to make a note in the minutes of that, if they're comfortable with that. Very good. Thank you. So I've got that. Councillor Courtney, are you seconding?
No, I'm not. I'm going to suggest that I'd like to give way to Councillor Bowater to do that. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bowater seconding the report. Thank you, Trudy. And Councillor Bowater there. So moved and seconded. Is there any debate? Thank you, Yvonne.
I didn't get the opportunity to ask a question because I really didn't have a question, so then I didn't ask in question time. But I wanted to say that I support this, and I wanted to acknowledge over my time that I have been involved with this committee. There's been wonderful support for the community, and I've been heartened by the enthusiasm by the officers and staff that we do have around this committee. So I do fully support, and I'd like to just acknowledge recently I went up to Melrose House for the AGM, and I would like to acknowledge all the staff that came. I'd like to take this time to do it publicly because I was very impressed. I think we outnumbered the rest of the people that were actually there, and I didn't get the opportunity to mention all the staff's names there, but all the ones that were there, thank you so much for attending. And I just think that this report is wonderful, and I'm a very visual person, and I appreciate all the pictures that we have seen, and I appreciate all the enthusiasm we have in the staff that we have in this committee. So thank you very much. It's been a great report to read.
Very good, and thank you, and thank you from the government's perspective. Thank you for those around the table to make this happen, and my two deputies there, and obviously the great team that do all the heavy lifting. I've been enjoying the term of this, and it's a committee that's very dear to my heart, and with community and recreation, they're very much a very visual part of what goes on by day, and we obviously get a lot of feedback, positive and negative, from the community. But the intent from this committee, both from the governance and from the staff, is always of the most well-being for the growth of this city. I won't add any more to that. Thinking I've got any other debate on that. Is that Councillor Noonan? And Trudy, did you want to write a reply? So Gail, was that your hand up for debate?
Look, I think the report was really comprehensive, covers heaps. I mean, this committee is a public-facing committee. It covers a lot of work. A lot of what you've got there is used daily by the public, and it's really important, this committee. I too hate to call favourites, but actually it is a favourite committee because of the work and the coverage and the interaction with the public. It's very much so. And thank you to the staff for that really good. I really enjoyed that PowerPoint presentation at the beginning. I was quite transfixed by it all, actually, because I think you can tell that you really enjoy what you're doing, and that comes through with the work. So yeah, I'm really pleased to support this. Thank you, Tim.
Very good. So, if there's any other words, Trudy, would you want to? No, very good. Hey, thank you, everyone. I'll put it, those in favour. So once again, you're on the reactions bar, hit the green tick if you're those for. Give an opportunity there to reach your keyboard. Very good. Those against? Carried unanimously. Thank you. that I believe finishes what we've got in the public part of the meeting. We're off into confidential. Do we need a bit of a break if we're in a confidential? We have to move straight into confidential once governments have a time to do that. Just a hands up if you go straight onto a confidential now.
Through the chair,
Just
if you could
raise
move
hands.
into confidential first before you adjourn, if you do it adjourn.
Okay. I'll just ask, did people want to adjourn or want to go straight from here? You do want to adjourn for a few minutes? Okay, so I'll move into confidential. Can I have someone move us into confidential? Moved by Councillor Edgar, seconded by Councillor Brand. I'll put it, those in favour. Aye. Carried. Done. So we'll have a 5-minute or 10-minute. I know I ask that question every time. 5 or 10. 5 minute, 10 minute. And just give note, I need